20 to order. Sorry, I'm just bringing my screen up here. There we go. So tonight's meeting broadcast on RCTV, Verizon Channel 33, Xfinity Channel 22, also available on Facebook Live, the link from RCTV, as well as YouTube. For public comment this evening, we actually have 3 sections. We have one general comment period, which will be at 7:15. Then we'll have public comment. We will open a public hearing for the tax classification, and we'll allow for public comment then. After closing that, we will be taking a quick break, and then we will have the water tank discussion, and we will be allowing public comment during that meeting as well. We've updated our resource and information slide pretty dramatically from where it has been. Still giving you basic information going to the town website where you can get most information about activities that are taking place. And then a couple of specific emails. For Human and Elder Services, you can contact Kevin and Kerry at covid-19help@ci.reading.ma.us, or for general questions regarding COVID-related issues, just covid-19@ci.reading.ma.us. Town Hall, you can reach 781-942-6680 with inquiries, needs, or comments. And there is a menu that will be there allowing for that. The big update we made is we got a presentation a few meetings ago from the Reading Coalition for Prevention and Support, and we wanted to provide the full information that they had on different services that are available to residents. What is new on this list is Elliott Emergency Services, which is a 24/7 mobile service for psychiatric evaluation, crisis intervention, stabilization, and follow-up. And that's for children, adults, and elders in psychiatric distress. The number is 800-988-1111. We also have services through Interface, which is a mental health referral hotline. And here's the phone number for that. The Mass Substance Abuse Information Education helpline is here. And then you can also reach out directly to the Reading Coalition, Semi Salkin, who is the outreach coordinator. And their phone number is 781-942-6756. Again, anytime there's an emergency, you should be calling 911 directly. The agenda for this evening, we'll start out with COVID-19 response. We have Carrie Donnell from the Board of Health, and then Bob will update on those activities. Laura Gem is here to provide an elections update. We have a little bit of time set for public comment. We'll then open our public hearing on the tax classification, and we have some people that have asked to speak during that hearing. At 7:50 approximately, we will move on to liaison reports and approval of minutes. We have one set of minutes in the packet to approve. And then I guess, Caitlin, we should move to, if we can get the last meeting's minutes for our next meeting, that would be great. So we can do that. We'll take a short break. Actually, we'll take a short break after the tax classification hearing, and then another just before we start the discussion on the water tank and cell carriers. We have worked with some of the representatives in the community, as well as many residents, to set up an agenda that I think should work pretty well. Ryan Percival will be on, as well as Bob, to talk about kind of the town staff presentation. A lot of the material was already included in our packet. At 8:15, we have 2 representatives of the neighbors, Jackie McCarthy, Mark Delaney, will be speaking, and they have a short presentation to make. We'll then open the discussion to neighbors, and we have quite a few that have requested to speak. At about 9 o'clock, we'll bring it back to the select board for discussion. If there are any other comments to follow after that, and then a wrap up from the select board. And I'll provide some comments just before we start that discussion in terms of setting expectations for everyone. Then our hope is that at about 10 o'clock, we'll come back to future meeting agenda topics, and we are scheduled to meet next Tuesday as well. So with that, let me stop sharing, and Carrie, if I can turn it over to you, please, for Board of Health update.
Sure. Good evening. Thank you. So COVID cases continue to rise across the state. Positive test numbers continue to go up. This is a time for, as I say every time I see you all, please don't let up on the precautions of face coverings, social distance, hand washing, And if your phone rings and you have, it may be a contact tracer. So if you don't recognize the number, maybe answer it. Please, we can take care of ourselves, and we help ourselves by doing these things. It may be a little tiresome for some, but it's very important. Cases are continuing to pick up. They are skewing younger. So, it was pointed out to me that there have been fewer deaths, and that is very good, certainly, but that doesn't mean that people aren't getting sick at the same time. Right now, the cases are skewing to younger people. It's still in the 16 to 29 age group, although I have seen some data that suggests that it might actually be dropping down a little bit younger. So we'll see what the weekly report comes out with tomorrow. So then I'll shift from that to Halloween. So with Halloween coming up, there is information on the town website about Halloween. We're asking that people please be safe, please use common sense. Halloween trick-or-treating should be done. Somebody said hyper local. Try and if you really need to trick-or-treat, maybe just do it on your street, and please with a small group, your family, the people that are in your bubble. There are other great ideas for safe activities that you can do that still will be just as fun. Yeah, thank you. And there's a link to the CDC website for some more information on that. But we work to provide some good do's and safe activities, right? Like a scavenger hunt or a neighborhood costume contest. Since it's a Saturday, maybe there's a chance to do something like that. And then I guess the last thing I would say is that we did welcome a new staff person at our meeting last week, which was lovely. Peter Morandi has come out of retirement, which to me says he is a true public health person. And he is joining our department and quickly coming up to speed with how we do things and meeting different folks. He attended command on Monday, and I was happy to meet him. He's worked. He was most recently the health director in Danvers, and he retired just before the pandemic, and he couldn't stay out of the game. So sorry, the game. That's. He couldn't stay out of the business, so he came back to help us out. We're very happy to have him. And that's all I have, unless there are questions.
Questions from board members? Great. Bob, do you want to do an update from command?
Thanks. We also discussed warrant report distribution. And just so the board knows, Jane Wellman had a brilliant idea where it's especially small warrant. There it is. We're mailing them out. So it's a pretty nominal cost to mail a warrant of that size. And then Laura Gem has sent a couple different communications that you should have received as town meeting members. And some people would prefer just an electronic copy. So that's either up on the website or will be shortly. So that, that issue is taken care of. The other issue we discussed without a conclusion yet is vaccine, possible vaccine distribution to the community. We'll probably come back whenever we know more to you and give an update. This is something that professionally Kerry works on. She's quite experienced in it. And the variables are so wide that it's hard to plan right now. If it was going to be a distribution to your whole community first, then if we knew that, then we know how to plan that. We suspect that's not the case. And we also don't know if the state will do the first distribution just to healthcare professionals, for instance. So, as we hear things, as we learn things, we'll communicate with the community through the select board. And that's the rest of the command meeting that we had. Thanks.
Board members, any questions? Great. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Next up, or unless you want to stay for Laura's update.
Oh, yes.
Laura, I'll turn it over to you, please.
So I'm not sure I have anything for the Board of Health with the update, maybe, but I just wanted to mention that early voting is going strong. We have, as of earlier today, I didn't look at the numbers before I left, but as of earlier today, we had over 1,000 early voters come in throughout the last 3 days. We mailed out, as you know, 10,000 ballots. And as I'm sure you've heard, about just over 1,000 of those were not requested. And I just wanted to give you an update of where we were with that. It turns out, after doing some investigating, it turns out that there was a process error, as well as a combination of a glitch in the system. And in the way that some folks that early voted in September, when we put them into the system, it automatically set them up to have a ballot mailed to them in November. So it was a process error on my part, is the reason why it happened. We are telling everyone, if you received a ballot that you do not wish to vote, that you did not request, just destroy the ballot and show up in person. It does not affect the ability to be able to vote. That process has been fixed, so it won't happen again, but just for everybody to be aware of. We are set to, we've made a few changes at the field house for anybody that plans to show up on election day. Everybody will come in through the front lobby, and we have a little bit of a better process of getting people through than we had in September. So if you're planning on coming down to vote on election day on November 3rd, just come in through the front lobby and we'll guide you in the right direction at that point. Anybody that cares to vote at the library, we will be there for early voting until September 30th, every day until September 30th.
October.
I'm sorry, October 30th. I'm trying to I'm trying to drag this along and give you more time to vote, I guess. October 30th. Everybody is entering the library through the South Street entrance, an entrance that you're not necessarily used to entering. But this way we can keep the traffic flow and not affect those that are using the library, because the library is open at this point.
And do you want to add the last day to register?
Oh, yes, good idea. Last day to register to vote is October 28th.
4th. Saturday.
I'm glad you're here, Bob. October 24th, on the last day to register, there will be a voter registration drive at the library from 2 to 4, and then again at Town Hall in the Town Hall parking lot from 6 to 8. Anybody that is not registered to vote that would like to vote early, we do have provisions in place so you can come down to the library, register to vote, and vote the same day up until the 24th. Did I forget anything else?
Perfect.
Quick question on the early voting schedule. You mentioned at the library till October 30th. Are there special hours, or are they just the full library hours during those days?
They're actually special hours, and those hours are posted on the website. They're different every day. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday is 8:30 to 5:30. Tuesday is 9 to 7, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is 12 to 5.
Thank you. Board members, any questions or comments? Ann?
Yes, Laura has already answered this question for me, but so that residents might also benefit from the answer. I asked Laura, if you received a mail-in ballot did not request one, but actually would wish to vote by way of that mail-in ballot, can you do so?
Most definitely. Yep, sure. Yep. Either vote the ballot and send it in, or vote in person, whatever your choice may be. Most of the ballots that are being returned, that have been sent out, are being returned through the drop box in Town Hall, at the Town Hall parking lot. That box is being emptied several times a day. At this point, we're actually caught up with all the ballots that have been returned. One thing I would like to mention is that there's a lot of folks questioning about the Track My Ballot system that's been put in place by the state. One thing to be aware of is that the Track My Ballot system is for mail-in ballots only. So if you vote in person, whether it be early voting or on election day, it will not show up on the Track My Ballot system. Also to be aware of, the town of Reading has a little bit of a glitch with the Track My Ballot system. In our voter registration system, we have all of the street names spelled out. So for example, if you live on Main Street, it actually says Main Street versus ST for the word street, which most folks are used to. So you have to actually type out Main Street and type out the word and not use any abbreviations, and then your name will come up.
Thank you. Other questions, board members? Great.
Real quick, Carrie, we're set as far as the Board of Health is concerned, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you for the work that you did to shift and for being careful about the distancing. It looks great.
All right. Any other questions?
Looks good. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
See you folks later.
Good night.
7:15 on the agenda next is public comment. Caitlin, do we have anyone for general public comment?
No.
We do not. Okay, so folks, the 7:30 is the start of the hearing, and I believe we cannot start before then. So why don't we take minutes if we could and bring that up? So we have the minutes from. Sorry, I remember it's on page, is it page 43? I think it is page 43 in the packet. These are minutes from September 22nd meeting.
Caitlin, I sent my edits earlier. Did you receive those? Great,
Yes, I
thank you.
did. I received some edits from Vanessa and some edits from Anne.
Can you share your screen? Perhaps that's the best way to do it. Post it that way.
Let me see.
Sorry, Karen, I saw
Actually,
your.
Caitlin, an edit on Thursday.
Oh, sorry, Karen. Okay. Okay, can you see that?
Just. Any questions from board members about, these are from Vanessa.
Those are Vanessa's.
Everyone all set with those? Great. Could you share Karen's, please?
Yep. Let's see. All right. Can you see those?
Yes. Okay with those, board members? Could I suggest one other change? Apologies for not sending it sooner. In the first section under Town Manager Bob LaSure gave a command update. So this is topics of discussion on the first page, the third paragraph. Yeah, update noted they worked on the Carl McFadden issue and he is all set now. Can I suggest that we indicate the Carl McFadden SNL University issue? So I think that clarifies quite a bit of what's going on there.
I might put it in brackets because I don't think that that was actually stated in the meeting.
I would be fine with that. Any other comments?
I did have a couple. I just had two very small edits.
Yep, they were, let me hold on one
Sorry.
second. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Looks good to me.
Fine with those. Great. Okay, Carlo, can I ask for a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes of September 22nd, 2020 as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ann. Any comments, discussion? None appearing. Let's take the vote. Carlo,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Nessa,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
and Mark, yes. You're 5-0. Thank you. Those are minutes. 7:20. We're still running ahead of 7:30. Maybe we can start liaison reports. I can again go around kind of same setup. Carlo, any updates on liaison reports?
Not tonight, thank you.
Great. Karen?
Yes, I just wanted to, from the Open Space and Recreation Planning Working Group, folks at home may have already seen the survey go up and get distributed. It is right on the front page of the website. That's a multi-departmental working group with conservation, GIS, IT, recreation, planning and engineering, and they would love to have as many people as possible complete that survey. And then they will be having more public input sessions after that. So if you haven't seen it, it's right on the front page of the website, and please do take a moment and fill it out. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Vanessa?
Yes, I met with, well, I chatted with Bob about the MWRA. We had talked at our last meeting regarding getting a better understanding of the fee structure. So Bob, thank you for that. It was very helpful. I'm going to do a little bit more research, make a couple calls to get a better understanding. And then Mark, I'll ask you if we can have a bigger discussion at a future date. So just so residents are aware, we are looking into the MWRA water rates.
Awesome. Thank you. Ann?
I don't have any liaison reports.
Great, thanks. Briefly, a number of us attended a series of meetings in the last week or so. One of them was the economic development meeting, which was great. We had a local commercial realtor, commercial real estate expert, who had a lot of valuable data about the town and what's happening and suggestions that I thought were great. Bob, in fact, maybe I'm wondering if we can get that presentation that he made from him and share that with the board and with the public. That would be great. Just very helpful. Also some local speakers. Julianne Thurlow spoke from Reading Cooperative Bank and just talked about the climate and opportunities and all the things that hopefully we can do to support local businesses now, as well as kind of the future plans. So it was a great start. Kudos to Aaron Schaefer for putting it together. Also, Dr. Barry Bluestone spoke and kind of did an update from his earlier study, kind of talking about what's happening in town. So very good presentation on that. The other thing going on is there have been a series of financial forums, another of which is tomorrow night, and discussing essentially budget-free cash, obviously going through warrant activities, but the select board was there just participating in those activities as well. And I think that's it. Great, we covered liaison reports. I think we do have to hang on for 3 or 4 more minutes. Bob, any quick topics? Yep.
Yeah, a reminder that a week from Thursday on October 29th at 7 o'clock, there's a virtual education session on the Stretch Energy Code. That's also on the website. We're going to post the board, so no need to worry if you have a quorum. Two last things. Look for a Human Elder Services survey coming out this week, basically on how are you doing with respect to COVID. We know it's kind of the specter of a long winter is looming, so we really want to get out there and ask people and follow up. The staff's done a good job dealing with people on the phone, but we want to distribute it a little more broadly just to make sure if there's any issues that people feel free to talk to us. And then the staff will have a better idea how to point their resources. On Thursday, it's the last of the town-sponsored flu clinics. We are, quote, sold out, unquote. We don't know if and when we'll get another supply of flu vaccine for this fall. So at this point, we're suggesting that folks check with your physician or the local drugstore and don't wait. This is the time and you should be inoculating. So that's all I have. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, folks. I think we have to hang on actually for another minute before we open the public hearing. And then after we open the hearing, I guess we'll call on you, Victor, to get started.
Mark,
Yeah, Carlo.
maybe we can make a few comments about town meeting and the precinct meetings that are going on, and another mock town meeting is on the books.
Sure. So the town committee informal working group has been getting together pretty regularly to make sure that we are ready to do that. This week, Laura sent out notes to all members of each precinct announcing a precinct meeting. There's not specific town meeting business. It's an opportunity to make sure your connection works, to make sure you're able to raise your hand through Zoom and things like that to make sure everyone is connected. This is again a virtual town meeting. There is opportunity for people to come to the PAC if they request to do so. I believe that Laura has asked if people can indicate if they want to do that. But the intention is the first item on the agenda is to take a vote to continue virtual. There is also a mock town meeting that will take place. I believe it's the Saturday before. Bob, do I have that right? Saturday before. Laura sent out a number of communications this week to people, actually in the last 2 days in particular, that have all the information on when those are going to take place. And again, it's an opportunity to just make sure that you're able to be connected, participate, be heard, and all the other activities. Laura, anything else you'd want to add on that?
No, I think you covered it. I will state that the town meeting warrants have gone out in the mail or will be going out first thing in the morning. So you should find them in your mailboxes in the next few days.
Great.
Laura, we
And Laura did send out this evening actually the link to the warrant report online if you're interested in getting it that way. It's available that way.
And the mock town meeting time on, I think it's October 7th, has not yet been set. We're still working with the moderator. I think we were thinking 11 a.m. Laura was the last proposal.
That's correct.
Okay, but she'll send it out to town meeting once the time is picked.
Great. Any other questions from board members? Great. Okay, let's I have the public hearing notice. I'll post up here. Carlo, give me 1 second. There you go. If I could ask you to read that, please.
Legal notice to the inhabitants of the town of Reading. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held in accordance with the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 369 of the Acts of 1982 on the issue of determining a residential factor in assessing the percentage of tax burden to be borne by each class of property for fiscal year 2021. The hearing will be held on Tuesday, October 20th, 2020 at 7:30 PM. remotely. The first 5 classes of property involved are residential, open space, commercial, industrial, and personal property. A copy of the proposed document regarding this topic will be available in the select board packet and on the town website at readingma.gov. All interested parties are invited to attend the hearing or may submit their comments in writing or by email prior to 12 PM on October 20th, 2020 to townmanager@ci.reading.ma.us. By order of Town Manager Bob LaShure.
Thanks, Carlo. Alrighty, and we do have some folks that would like to make public comment. Are they in the waiting room?
Yes.
Great. Who do we have?
All right, we have Lisa Egan first.
Great. Can you ask Lisa join, please? Hi, Lisa. I think you are connected. There you go. You are connected. Hello.
How are you?
All good. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Great. We're ready for your comment, please.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to share with the board some of the ways the chamber has partnered with local businesses as well as the town, just to let everyone know kind of the state of affairs in Reading in terms of the local businesses. I had a meeting with them just yesterday to talk about Shop the Block and a pivot to support them through the fall. Since they're not able to have that one night event, we're going to work together on something that will run probably 4 or 6 concurrent Thursdays to provide people opportunities to shop in our great stores without having thousands of people downtown at once. We also have partnered with the town of Reading to take out one permit to allow any business in Reading to have a sidewalk sale through the month of October. The permitting process does take a little bit of work, and we understand why the rules are there, but we knew that it would be important to allow people to take advantage of the last few weeks of nice weather. And the chamber welcomes all businesses, members or not, to have sidewalk sales. You can reach out to me if you are hearing this for the first time and you would like to participate. We'd love to add you to our permit. But I'm really proud of the ways we've been partnering together to support our local businesses within the community. The bistro tables that were just featured in North Shore Magazine that the town did. Is another great example of that. So I just wanted to let you know that we're working hard, and we also have partnered with the Fall Street Fair Reading Rotary host to offer a shop local bingo, which just wrapped up this week, and one winner will win a $500 shopping spray. So they can pick any store or stores if they need new glasses, and they also want to take their family out to dinner. They can spend the money in any way they so choose, and we're grateful that the Rotary, is supporting our businesses when they can't host their fair downtown. But on a more somber note, we also know that the governor has their ban on evictions has ended this week. So perhaps he will extend it again. We'll find out. But I am a little anxious in the chamber office, and I know a lot of other of my colleagues are as well, to see if this may change the landscape of Reading businesses, because I know that some are doing fine and thriving and others are really struggling. So in the spirit of, continued partnership and all of the crazy twists and turns that this year has brought us, I ask you to help us keep the positive momentum by maintaining the tax rate we have now and not increasing it, because as you all likely know, most of our businesses are in a triple net lease. So what that means is that if the property owner's taxes go up through a vote that you're going to make tonight, those expenses go directly through to their tenants. So, and it raises no additional funds for the town. So I know we meet about it every year. And this year is certainly no different, where we want to support our businesses together. And I ask for you to consider just the the state of the economic region and help us to continue to support them through this time of uncertainty by keeping the tax rate the same.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this is not to just piggyback off of Lisa's comment about the expiration of the eviction moratorium. The governor did not renew it. It did expire, but has instituted an eviction diversion program. Bob, I trust that Human and Elder Services is aware of this and what's going on and what resources are available to residents. There is actually a CDC eviction moratorium that now is in place as a result of the lapse in the Massachusetts one, but it depends on your income eligibility and is also dependent on tenants filing a declaration with their landlords. But I trust that Human and Elder Services is aware of this, but I just, certainly would want them to be so informed and advise residents in need accordingly.
Thanks, Ann. All right, thank you, Lisa. We have one other speaker, I believe, public comment so far, Caitlin?
Yes. John Means.
John Means. Hi, John. Welcome to our meeting.
Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all.
And you as well. This
All
is as
doing
close to,
well.
yeah, this is as close to seeing as we get for a bit.
Yeah, well, the new norm, I guess, right? But like I said, it's really good to see everyone. My name is John Means. I'm a resident and business owner in Reading. My address is 19 Cape Cod Ave. Currently, I'm moving in 2 days but I'm staying in Reading, so important. Yes, exactly. Very happy about that. Sort of to echo a little off of what Lisa said, and I don't really want to keep drumming the same beat. I came to you in front of you guys last year, and you guys were very understanding and welcoming to what we had to say as a business community, and that we didn't think the timing was right to do a split tax rate. And we really were under a big assumption that this year would be a year to have that conversation. And I think we were all ready to have that conversation. Unbeknownst to all of us, it's taking quite a different turn. I think to say that this year the timing isn't right is even an understatement. I do want to commend the board. I want to say that what I've seen transpire, especially over the last few months, between what you've done locally for what has happened for residents and businesses is quite impressive. And I really do believe that that bridge between the residential community and the business community is really starting to grow closer. And I think we're really starting to hit a good stride as becoming a community that does involve everyone, from just residents to businesses to property owners, and it's really refreshing to see. And I think we need to keep that going. And I think a really good show of faith would be to show that we understand the hardship that everyone is going through. I mean, it's not just businesses, it's not just residents, it's everyone. Everyone is going through hardship right now. There's so much uncertainty. I know in speaking with certain business owners that they were even afraid to go for another PPP loan because they're afraid of next year not having the money to pay taxes. They're not sure if that's going to be considered income next year. So in considering all of these factors, and such as like Lisa mentioned, where the moratorium is ending on the eviction and rental tenants, and it comes back to what I was saying, the uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty going around everything. I think the last thing we want to do to anyone is put more of a financial burden on businesses all the way down to residents. Because I think we all understand where the split tax rate eventually will trickle down to. You know, we're all aware of that. We don't need to sort of go into that. But it's not just the property owners. It trickles down all the way down to the consumers. And I would hate to see that happen to consumers, that prices on products go up. And now we're in a vicious cycle of businesses struggling, consumers struggling to pay for products, and property owners struggling to keep their tenants in the buildings. So, you know, last year I asked that the board take into consideration a lot of factors, and maybe it's not the right time. And this year I think we need to repeat that mantra. I don't think it's the right time for the split tax rate, but I do understand that is really kicking the can down the road, and we can only kick it so far. So I think, you know, next year, if all is well, and I'm pretty faithful, we're going to get there. I have a lot of faith in what we can do in this country, and all the way down to what we can do as a community in Reading. And I am faithful. We're going to be in a lot better position next year to have a serious conversation about this. But I think, you know, this year is just, again, unfortunately, it's unfortunate, but it's just not the right time. And that's personally how I feel, as not just a business owner, but also as a resident of Reading. I think we're making big strides in getting our downtown to be revamped. We're starting to see things sort of turn around, and it like I mentioned at the beginning, it's very positive to see, and I hope that continues.
Thanks, John.
And I want to thank you guys all for your time and what you guys have done. It's been very impressive and refreshing. Thank
Thanks,
you.
John. Thank you. Caitlin, do we have anyone else in the waiting room that would like to speak?
Not on this topic.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I meant on this topic. Thank you. So as this is a public hearing, if there are folks that are watching now that would like to participate, if you can send an email to selectboard@ci.reading.ma.us, you can speak during this hearing. So if there are folks, we can start our discussion a little bit, but we'll allow folks to send in a note if they would like to speak. So let me open it to board members. Any thoughts or comments thus far? Ann.
I would echo what Vanessa and Carlo indicated at our last meeting, and a lot of what Lisa and John have said tonight. We are in a time of uncertainty, and we do not want to create additional uncertainty for residents or businesses. I think we need to stay the course with our tax rates and not create anything new that's going to create confusion or cause people to have to make new decisions for their families or their businesses beyond what they're already grappling with. So I think we stay the course.
Can you hear me?
Yes, got you now.
Sorry, as I stated last week, that, you know, of course, I don't want to make any changes. I would like to go backwards, but I know that's not going to happen. I wish we never had a split tax rate beyond the senior tax relief, but that ship has sailed. So I am with the board members that have spoken already that I propose no changes this year, and no changes going forward for several years. Thank you.
Thanks, Carlo. Karen.
Victor, thank you for that presentation. I appreciated that. It's a wide variety of data points to look at. And I'm going to agree with the other board members. I'm comfortable keeping the tax rates steady for this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I feel very similarly. I think that we really have a duty to keep the rates as they are for this year. As John stated, I think we were all hoping that the incredible growth that was taking place pre-COVID would work out in everyone's favor, and we could kind of relook tax rates and structures. But I don't see that as being now at all. I think we need to be very supportive of our local businesses as a board. I think obviously as residents, the same thing. We need to be very supportive of our local businesses. Eating out in town or eating in town, I guess is the right expression in some cases, but supporting those businesses and whatever we can do. And as it relates to the tax, I too am in favor of holding where we are now. Any other comments? Caitlin, any other people come into the room? No? Carlo, I saw your hand next.
Sorry, I thought you meant any comments for us. I have a question for Victor, if that's okay.
Please, so should we close the public hearing at this point, folks? And then we can, oh, I see Victor, you want to speak before the public hearing is closed?
Should I give any presentation?
There's an expression about when you have the sale.
I know. I know. I'll follow you. I'll lead.
Well, so to be clear, you gave us quite a presentation in the packet. And I think all the information was in there regarding differential rates, looking at each of the, I think there are 4 actions that you're going to ask us to take this evening. I think those are all in there and we can go through those in a moment. If board members do not need to see any additional information, I don't think we'll need it unless there are specific questions on each of the votes. So Caitlin, still no one has indicated interest?
Nope.
Okay, my suggestion then is why don't we close the public hearing and then we can kind of have our final discussions and take the votes.
Do we need for purposes to keep it open until 8 because of how it appears on the agenda? Or no rules?
No.
No? Okay.
Mark, would you like me to share a screen of motions?
Yes, please, that would be great. So does that include the motion to close the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, yes, please.
How's that?
Sorry, I lost my screen, but it's back. Great. Okay, Carlo, can I ask you to read the first motion, please?
Okay. Move that the select board close the hearing establishing the FY 2021 tax rate.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Karen. Any discussion on closing? We'll take a vote. Carlo?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
And Mark, yes. So the public hearing is closed. Thank you, folks. First thing, to answer Victor's request, would any members like to see anything in particular at this point, or do you want to go through the motions and then he can, the specific motions, I didn't mean that in the sense it sounded, the specific motions, and then answer questions related to that? Would that be okay? We'll go motion by motion?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So Carla,
Mark, the only comment I have is that motions should technically be in the affirmative. And so if we are opposed to it, then we vote against. So for example, motion 2, move the select board grant an open space discount for fiscal year 2021. We don't do this, so we would all, if you are opposed to this, then you would vote no. And it might be helpful if we have just a quick reminder on what each of these motions are, just so that we're all 100% on whether we're for or against.
Yes, I would appreciate selecting those answers in advance. It's a little confusing. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, for the structural comment. So do you want to read the motion and have Victor make comments kind of with full description? Would that make sense to do it? Great. Okay, so let's do that. So Carlo, could you read the second motion and as Vanessa suggested, in the affirmative, so just the word grant.
Yep. Move that the select board grant an open space discount for fiscal year 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vanessa. Victor, can we turn the floor to you to describe this? And if you would like, if you want to use the slide that you have on this, that would be fine. No, we're just talking through. Great.
There's no land in this town that meets the specific and stringent criteria to be defined as open space.
Okay. And in the past, the board has obviously then not had voted against this motion.
Okay.
So a vote against the motion would affirm what Victor just said. A vote for it would be to try to create an open space discount for land that we don't have. Any further board questions? Okay, let's take a vote. So Carlo,
No.
Karen,
No.
Anne,
No.
Vanessa,
No.
and Mark, no. So we're 5-0 on that. Let's move to motion number 3. Again, in the affirmative, please, Carlo.
Move that the select board adopt a residential exemption for fiscal year 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Karen. Victor, to you.
Basically, the top third of the residential homeowners would be paying for an exemption for the other 2/3 in the community. No.
And in the past, the board has not voted for this, correct?
That is correct.
Sorry, Vanessa.
Nope, that was it. I wanted that clarified. Thanks.
Other questions from the board? So just to clarify, I don't know if the voice got trapped on that. So in the past, we have not voted for this exemption. Okay, are we ready to take a vote? Great. Carlo?
No.
Karen?
No.
Anne?
No.
Vanessa?
No.
And Mark, no. Okay, thank you. On to the next. This is now Article 4, please, Carlo.
Well, there's
Or
a
motion 4.
don't we need a number?
We
I
do.
have
in
the
fact.
number.
Okay, so go ahead, Victor, please.
Care to jot this number down, Carlo?
Yep.
0.998481.
Okay.
Bob, can
Move-
we, there it is, sorry, thank you.
Perfect.
We're good?
Please.
Yes.
Move that the select board adopt a residential factor of 0.998481 for the fiscal year 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thanks, I got Karen on that one first. Board member discussion. So just to clarify, Victor, this is the exact same residential factor that we used last year. Is that correct?
This will maintain a 1.02 shift. This will be the third consecutive fiscal year that we've done so. And it's more or less a fine tuning, really. We tried our first year to equalize both rates, and it wasn't my finest hour as it resulted in a spectacular failure. So.
But we're good with this. Okay, board members, any questions for Victor or for discussion? No, we're ready to take a vote then. Great. So this one, an affirmative vote would be to accept this factor, just to be clear for everyone. Okay, great. Carlo,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
Vanessa,
Yes.
and Mark, yes. So we're 5-0. And then motion number 5, Carlo, if you could read that, please.
Move that the select board grant
There
a
you go.
commercial exemption. I got it. Move that the select board grant the commercial exemption for the fiscal year 2021.
Is there a second? Need a second first, Victor. One
Second. Second.
by Vanessa. Victor, please.
It should read small commercial exemption.
Will people accept that as a friendly amendment?
Yes.
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 Great. Okay. A small commercial exemption for fiscal 21. Okay, Victor, back to you, please.
After reviewing the information provided to us from the Department of Employment and Training, there's 2, maybe 3 buildings that may qualify. As you may be aware, it can't be worth more than $1 million. It has to have 10 or fewer employees. If there's more than one business in the property, all businesses have to qualify, and any tax exemption would go to the property owner, who's not necessarily the business owner. So not a no vote would be appropriate.
Right. And in the past, we have not done this.
Have
Is that
not.
correct? We have not done this. Karen.
Question for Victor, and of those 2 properties that seem that they could potentially qualify, are those property owners who live in Reading or out of Reading, or do you know anything about it?
No.
Okay,
They're in real estate trusts, so.
okay, thank you.
Other questions? None appearing. Again, just to clarify here then, so we'd be, a yes vote would be to grant this exemption, a no vote would be to not grant it. Victor's comment or discussion so far was to a recommendation not to do this. So are we ready to vote? Great. Carlo,
No.
Karen,
No,
Anne,
No.
Vanessa? Oh, sorry, didn't hear.
No.
Great. And Mark, no. So we're 5-0 on that. Thank you, Victor. Excellent.
Thank you, folks.
Excellent
Have a
prep.
good evening.
thank you, Victor.
You as well.
Night.
Mark, can I ask Victor a quick question? Is that
Oh, sure,
possible?
please. Yep.
Victor, can you correct me? I seem to believe that our commercial industrial property percentage is going down.
Yes, it is, because residential properties keep, exploding in value each and every year, and commercial properties are still relatively flat. While they have risen, it's nowhere near the growth the residential sector has seen.
Also, thank you for that. I was mostly referring to the percentage residential versus commercial. Right now I see 7.36. Seems like that number has gotten lower over the years.
That's because when you compare that to the total tax base, just think of a scale. Residential scale grows in value. The commercial side stays flat. Residential properties pick up more of the share of the tax burden. So that's what that's measuring.
Thank you.
So Victor, on the residential side, that's both rate of increase in value as well as just more properties as well?
Well, it's all the growth in the class, which would include valuation appreciation, new construction, things of that nature.
Got it. Super. Any other questions for Victor? Great. Thanks, folks. Why don't we take just 5 minutes here, literally, and we'll come back at 8:05, and we will. Let me just make sure I'm correct on my calendar here for activities. We'll go. Yep, we'll go right into the water tank and cell carrier discussion. So we'll recess till 8:05. We'll come right back 8:05 and start from there.
Mark, for the next one, I have about a minute and then Ryan will take over.
Okay, I'm going to,
And you're going to introduce it?
yeah. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
Vanessa and Anna, you folks there and ready? You just need Ann. All right, hot tea bag coming across. Ann, are you back?
She'll be back. You can just start.
Yeah, I think that's probably fine. Okay, I'll call the select board back into session. So folks, now we're going to have the discussion about the water tank and cell carriers. For way of background for board members and the public watching, we've had some discussions with a number of the local residents to that tower, and they agreed to have two people act as representatives for them for the purposes of a more formal presentation, as well as allowing other residents to speak. So Caitlin, what I'd ask is, can you let Jackie and Mark join now? And then we'll get started from there. I have some preliminary comments, and I know then Bob and then Ryan will go from there.
It's Jackie McCarthy, correct?
Jackie McCarthy and Mark Delaney. And we'll get started from there. I have some preliminary comments, and I know then Bob and then Ryan will go from there. Hey, Jackie and Mark, welcome.
Hello.
Can we ask you first to, since you're inside the meeting now, to turn off whatever the background was, if it was RCTV or it was YouTube or Facebook. Otherwise, you're going to hear me at least twice.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, great. So welcome, everybody. I have a few kind of preliminary things I wanted to say about the meeting tonight, and then we'll turn it over and kind of get the discussion started. So the purpose of this evening's discussion is just that, is to have a discussion between staff, the public, and the select board to explore concerns, questions, and issues, and to ideally generate some ideas and options for how we might take this forward. We are not taking any votes this evening that would relate to a specific path forward or not path forward. But what we will do at the end of our discussion, the end of the select board discussion, is talk about what the next steps are. And those could be in the form of what additional information we need in a time frame to get that so that we can take this forward. And I would envision, that might be in this, early December sort of time frame. It's not kind of next week, but it would be a kind of a meeting that would follow soon. For this evening, we have many people who have requested to speak. And in order to accommodate that, I'm going to ask that we hold very tightly to this 3-minute time limit that we established for public comment related to this topic. I'll set a timer, and I apologize. It's a little rude, but when the timer goes off, I'm going to ask that whoever is speaking finishes their comments in just a couple of seconds so that we can move on, so that your other neighbors have a chance to speak. What we have done in the past, what I suggest we do this evening is we'll admit speakers when it's time for the public, excuse me, the individual neighbors to speak. We'll admit them one at a time. When their comments or the 3 minutes are finished, we will ask that they leave the meeting before we invite in the next speaker. And just a comment, when you do enter the meeting, please mute either RCTV or the Facebook or YouTube that's behind you. Otherwise, you will have the opportunity to hear everything twice. And once, I think, will be more than enough for now. So with that, those are my comments. Let me turn it over to you, Bob.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to share a screen so it's easier to see. This is a portion of Ryan's presentation, but I just want to quickly go over some history just to set the right stage. In 2016, we observed that the water tank needed to be replaced. And the tradition in Reading was to take the equipment off, paint the tank, and off we go, put the equipment back. But in discussions with the select board in October of 16 and June of 2017, we discussed other options. And town meeting allocated $100,000 in FY17 to explore some of those other options, one of them being a cell tower design. Some of the other aspects that were studied was to replace the tank with something that did not need to be painted, because the maintenance of painting every 15 or 20 years was very disruptive to the service coverage and to the operation. And at the same time, the board, through staff, asked the cell carriers for some information for how the residents would see cell coverage in the two different possibilities, a tower or a tank. Starting then in December of 2017, during the winter budget process, the select board, FinCom, and ultimately in April 2018 town meeting approved a capital plan that had $400,000 for a cell tower construction in it. It was not scheduled until FY20, so it was not right away. So we knew that there would be an additional public process that would begin, and Ryan will describe that in July 2018. So I just wanted to make sure everyone had a clear understanding of what town meeting had authorized, and then we'll pick up the timeline and go forward.
Thanks, Bob. Turn it over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Bob. If I share my screen here, I'm gonna.
Ryan, can I ask you just introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Yes, Ryan Percival, town engineer, town of Reading. I'm just going to switch over here and share the presentation. You can see part of more of the timeline there that Bob had started off on. Oops, sorry about that. It's the Auburn Street water tank. I just want to make it clear that we're really looking for a water tank replacement project, and that's really the most important thing to emphasize right now at the beginning of the presentation, is that we really need to do some maintenance on this tank, but now we need to replace the tank. And so that's where we're at now. And the biggest hurdle that we found during this whole process is those antennas that you can see up on our gorgeous tank there, that are pretty much a hurdle for us moving forward in any fashion. I'm going to slip right into what I think is probably the most important slide in the presentation here, and then I'll slip into really what we're planning on doing with the tank, just for a background. As Bob had mentioned, we started this process back in 2016, in which case we found out that we needed to do some severe maintenance on our tank. We had some areas that were bubbling up in painting, some areas of structural disrepair. We had areas of the tank that were littered with, and still are littered with, cell carrier equipment and wires. And then also areas that have some structural adequacy issues because of that equipment. The tank was not designed in a fashion to support that additional equipment. And so when we looked at moving forward with the painting project, we also needed to do a large amount of structural repair and increase the structural integrity of the current tank if we needed to paint. That brought us in front of the select board in 16. That also brought us in front of the select board in 17. And in FY17, as Bob had mentioned, there was $100,000 that was allocated for design for a cell tower, temporary cell tower, something in that fashion. We knew that we needed money to move forward for a design of something. Those two previous board meetings resulted in us taking a look at a life cycle cost analysis at that point. Our design consultant produced a memo, I believe it was December of 17, December 23rd of 17. And shortly after that, we requested information from the cell carriers based on that June 27, 17 meeting for information on coverage on the cell tower versus a tank. And I believe we picked a height somewhere around 125 feet, and then you'll see some areas of 165 feet that they use for a temporary tower. And out of that request for information was also information requested by residents at that point and the board on some health impacts of that. So that's all in your packet and things that we have discussed in the past. From that point, we started moving forward with the project, did a topographic survey of the area, we performed subsurface borings and did soil analysis. The soil analysis was primarily for lead. We do know that we had lead paint on the old tanks. We do have lead paint in the soil, and the town will be remediating that when we move forward with the project. A geotechnical rule was subsequently drafted at that point, and then we also had the design consultant look into one of the questions that we received from the select board and the residents at that time, whether or not we could fit 4 carriers on a new tank. And the memo stated that we do have the space to do so on this new tank, and we can do it in a adequate fashion and design it appropriately. That brought us to town meeting, in which we had the discussion after the July 18 select board meeting to move forward and put $400,000 in the capital. After that meeting, I'm sorry, in April we requested that, and we had the meeting in July. After that meeting, it was suggested by staff and Bob that we rescind that $400,000 because of the concerns that the public had at that point. And we didn't have a clear path moving forward. So the best thing to do was to remove that out of the capital at that point. April 2019, we requested the $4.5 million for the new water tank because we were moving forward with the composite elevated tank in that fashion. From that point, we had a request for proposals based on select board that the carriers construct a temporary tower. It was a very tricky RFP. Town council also reviewed it along with procurement. It went out. The RFP essentially asked the carriers to design and build temporary water tank for a period of temporary cell tower for a period of time while the water tank was being built, pay for their equipment to be moved over, placed on the temporary tower, and moved back onto the new tank. In conjunction with this, there was also a component that awarded, depending on how the bid was awarded, the winner of the bid would assume a preferential space on the tank, so the best spot on the tank, and then from there it would be figured out based on how the bids came out. After review, the bids were considered non-responsive for numerous reasons. Nothing was really answered in the adequate fashion that the town had asked for. In the RFP, it's important to note that there was an ask for the cell carriers to base their bids on a 190-foot tower, and this was for bidding purposes only, so there was basically an even field, and the maximum height that would ever happen was there, so they could actually base it on something that was even straight across the board. So if a carrier had a more preferential treatment to put something up that was higher to pay for that temporary tower, they could do so, and we weren't limiting bids at that point. But that's again, they came back non-responsive. Since then, we've had meetings with cell carriers, and as Bob had pointed out in some of the answers to the questions that we received, it's more lucrative for cell carriers to fund through an operations and leasing standpoint than it is through a construction funding standpoint, as well as some of the permitting issues and liability issues that the carriers would face being in a town-owned lot. And then that brought us to the update in June 16th of this year. It's really important to know that at this point, the question was really, where do we move? How do we get forward? How do we build this tank? What do we do with the cell carriers? A temporary tower, and we landed on a temporary tower or a permanent tower. At the same point, they're essentially the same structurally. I want to make that clear. That's why we just mentioned the two. But let's just talk about a temporary tower for talking standpoint. We had numerous meetings with carriers going back as far as 16 to figure out what we were going to do, even if we were going to paint. The discussion of using portable telescopic antennas, also known as COWs, that was brought up. There are currently 3 carriers on the tank, and their equipment is quite heavy. And to place 3 carriers on one of those places a large load on one of those portable antennas. So they weren't ideal in that situation. If they were moving forward, we would need numerous ones, and we do not have the land available to do that. As well as when you start placing 3 on top of those portable units, you also have wind loading that you have to take into account. So this is why our consultant, along with the town and carriers, landed on a temporary structure, okay, or a permanent structure, depending on what the path is moving forward. Now, it's important to note that if neither of those two happen, we will lose coverage. There will be no continuity of service for a period of time. It could also mean legal issues moving forward, whatever those may be. And so that's essentially where we are at this point now. And just the last bullet here, we did take some time to draft up some answers to a lot of the great questions that did come in through the public and through the board. I'm happy to go through those questions at any point if anyone wants a clarification on anything. I can do that now, or we can wait till the end of the presentation. What I'm going to do now is just go through and just show everyone what the tank would look like, what some of the issues we had and why we're moving for a tank, why we have problems with the carriers, and where the location of what we just settled on as far as where a temporary or permanent structure possibly could go. And so I can move forward at that point.
Please, I would suggest let's move forward with what you want to show here. Let's not go through the Q&A. I think we're all anxious to get to the public, to Jackie and Mark first. Mark, I had trouble remembering your name for a second there. And then to come back, listen to the residents, and then I'm sure there'll be questions and answers we want to do at that point.
Absolutely, and I won't spend too much time on this because we've seen this presentation a few times now, but essentially it's a 750,000 gallon tank. What we're proposing is a replacement of that tank with a composite elevated tank, which would be basically a concrete pedestal, and on top of that concrete pedestal would be a glass fused to steel structure, which essentially doesn't require any painting for a long period of time. And there's some highlights in here on the last time that we painted or did any maintenance. Here are some of the issues that we do currently have on the tank. As you can see, we can't safely walk around on our catwalk to assess our tank, which happens every year or every 2 years when we do a sanitary survey. Again, here's some more equipment. So it's pretty substantial. It looks small from the ground, but it is quite a lot. There's some cabling coming down. Here's the existing site. This would be the existing Auburn Street tank. This is where we would be looking to replace with a new tank. That would mean that we only have this area in here to utilize for laydown area construction, lifting and placement of the new tank, as well as some sort of location for temporary structure. And so after our last meeting, we had another conversation with our tower consultant, as well as our water tank consultant, to try to figure out where location, depending on whatever solution we use, would be the best location in regards to the construction of the tank, because they have to happen seamlessly, and we need to have one up before the other one can come down, and we also need to make sure we have room in order to dismantle and construct the new tower. So we do need a laydown area. And so this is the area that we were looking at here. And we were also taking into account area where we would not need to remove too many trees or screening at that point. Moving forward, we will be replanting in whatever fashion that we need to beautify the area and to allow for more screening. So, but this is where we landed on here. You can see that triangle. That would be where whatever structure would be placed. So it wouldn't matter whether it be temporary or permanent. That's where the position right now would be, given logistics. And again, we've seen these maps before. This was from the RFI. I just thought it was interesting to just put this in here as just an overview. The RFI requested what the coverage change would be. The green is existing, with the tan being the expansion of what would happen if a tower did go up. Again, here we are, existing coverage. Same slide. This is expanded coverage with the tower. This one here I placed at 165 feet, but a lot of the RFI was at 125 feet. And so moving forward, this is just basically a reiteration of what I just explained as far as what the proposed water tank will be. And this is essentially, it'd be a little bit different in the actual size. This is smaller than ours, but this is what you'd be looking at. You'd be looking at a concrete pedestal and a glass fused to steel on top. Again, the manufacturer standard for color is cobalt blue. You'd have to actually pay, oh, sorry about that. Go back. And you'd actually have to pay for a different color. And it's quite expensive because they have to retool the machines because it's not paint. But you can see on here, this is the important thing I wanted to show, and I will put this back on slide view. These are the antenna and the carriers. They happen at 3 azimuths on the tank. That's how it would be on our tank. And if you can't really see it, but there is a reinforced structural ring that goes around that they're able to be bolted on and bolted off in the more appropriate design fashion. And so that's what we planned on doing. That's still currently the plan, right now. And we're basically in a holding pattern until we figure out what we need to do to get these carriers off the tank so we can replace it. And Bob, if I missed anything, feel free, but I didn't want to spend too much time on this presentation.
Oh, this was great, Ryan. Thank you. Very helpful in terms of kind of understanding where we are related to the tank. Board members, with your permission, let's move forward. Let Jackie and Mark speak to the board. They have a little bit of a presentation that I'm going to drive for them if they would like. And let's go there. So Jackie and Mark, to you folks.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and board members. I'm Jackie McCarthy. This is my husband, Mark Delaney. We live at 26 Beacon Street. We're here tonight on behalf of our neighborhood, and some of our neighbors will also speak individually. I'm going to start with the 5 reasons we are against the proposal to build a cell tower on the Auburn Street water tank site. And then I'll turn it over to Mark, who will run through a couple of the slides. So first, Do we need a cell tower? No, we already have a cell tower in the form of a water tank. That water tank has hosted antennas for over 20 years. And as the town manager and the town engineer described to a previous select board in July of 2018, a new water tank can be built to accommodate all of the antennas currently on our water tank, plus an additional set of antennas for a total of 4 carrier antennas. We can do this safely, we can do it securely, as Mark will describe in more detail, and we should continue to use this structure for cell antennas. Second, does a standalone cell tower belong in this residential neighborhood? No. Does a standalone cell tower belong in any residential neighborhood in Reading? No. That's why our cell tower ordinance requires applicants to consider locations on interstate highway easements, industrial zones, and business zones before even considering a cell tower in a residential zone. I'd like to ask each of you to think about how you would feel about the prospect of a cell tower 50 feet or 100 feet from your front door. These things don't belong near people's homes. Third, will this tower harm our neighborhood? Absolutely. For the temporary benefit to some carriers and for apparently a more lucrative option for carriers to fund their capital costs through leasing, this tower would create a lifetime of harm for our neighborhood. It would ruin our neighborhood's residential character and take away a significant green space with mature trees. It would also create a significant reduction in the property values of our home and the homes of our neighbors. For most people, their house is their biggest single investment. We used our house equity to fund our children's education. Other people use that equity to retire. Any consideration of the costs of this tower must also include the significant reduction in property values in our neighborhood, which will total into the millions collectively. Fourth, is the hundreds of thousands of dollars required to build this cell tower for the use of carriers a good use of town funds? No. As we've heard time and again, we're in a time of unprecedented economic uncertainty and challenge. Yet the town is proposing to subsidize multi-billion-dollar carriers by building a cell tower that is not the town's responsibility to build. We have a lot of other town priorities that deserve our investment and our focus. This isn't one of them. Fifth and finally, process. The process by which we've arrived here tonight has been a disgrace. After the July 2018 Select Board meeting, at which our neighborhood heard from that board that we would proceed with the replacement of a water tank that can accommodate new antennas, and that if the carriers wanted to build a cell tower, they would have to go through the process and do it. We heard nothing else for over 2 years. In that intervening time, an RFP was issued, but not put on the town's procurement website. And on June 16th of this year, this select board held a meeting to consider a permanent or temporary tower with no notice to neighbors. We would have missed this entirely if it hadn't been for a neighbor who caught a news article about it in the Town Chronicle in the middle of a pandemic. With this kind of lack of transparency, it's really no wonder that a lot of people are pretty cynical about government. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mark.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for all the time you've invested in this, visiting our neighborhood individually. We enjoyed meeting with you. What my wife just presented, in our opinion, is all the information the board should need to make a decision on this and say no. What I'm going to speak to now are the documents, the statements that the town manager and the town engineer have made to justify building a cell tower in our neighborhood. They have raised two issues to justify this. The first is this short-term loss of cell service, and secondly, security. According to the town engineer in the 2018 meeting, the replacement of the water tank would take 4 to 6 months. Will everybody lose their cell service when those antennas come off the water tank? No. One of the carriers isn't even on there. The town engineer, in his memo to the board this past June, spoke to a concern about the disruption of cell service. But let's cut to the chase. Who's responsible for providing cell service? Everyone here has cell service. Each month you pay your bill to get cell service. You're not paying the town of Reading. You're paying one of the carriers. So with respect to addressing the issue with regard to this water tank and providing cell service, that responsibility is the carriers. It's not the town of Reading's. Let me give you an example that I think hits close to home. Venetian Moon, middle of a pandemic. Their customers don't want to go inside because of the virus to purchase food, have dinner. What does Venetian Moon have to do? They have to purchase or rent and erect their own tent so they can provide food service. They paid for their own infrastructure. This is the same thing. The difference here is that the town of Reading is going to pay for the infrastructure for these multi-billion-dollar corporations that don't need any assistance from the town of Reading to provide cell service. But let me talk a little bit about, for the first time I've heard from Ryan mention cell on wheels. Let me talk about how cell carriers manage the loss of one of their antennas as part of their network. First of all, my wife and I are familiar with this because we've represented the cell carriers for many years, and we're very knowledgeable of this specific issue. First of all, it's not uncommon for this very issue to occur for these cell carriers. It happens every single day across this country where antennas of theirs go out of service. These are highly sophisticated technology companies that are very adept at managing this very issue. And if I could have the first slide, Mark. And here's how they do it. One of the ways they do that is they crank up the power on surrounding antennas to fill the gap of that down antenna. Another way they do it, which Ryan just mentioned for the first time in 4 years, you probably read the article from the from the paper last week, because I mentioned this. Here's what they do. They put a true temporary tower on the site if they need it, called a cell on wheels. And if you just, there's an industry now for cell on wheels. Let me read to you just the last sentence in this ad I pulled up on the internet just the other day. These mobile towers are typically used to create a boost a cellular network for a brief period, during an emergency, for a big event, or while a full tower is being built. Why shouldn't the two carriers that are on the water tank, if they needed a temporary tower, why shouldn't they, as an option, bring one of these on the site? Verizon, for example, has a division within their company that just rents out cells on wheels. They call them cows. Let's assume, though, for just a minute, and Jackie referenced this, that cell service is going to be disrupted. That's their responsibility. That the carriers aren't going to do anything other than wait for the new water tank to be built to put their antennas back up on it. My question to this board, based on what the town engineer said, this was a 4 to 6 month project, is the short-term disruption of cell service for some people in the town. Is the solution to that short-term problem a lifetime of harm imposed on our neighborhood by building a 190-foot cell tower, impacting the character of our neighborhood, reducing our property values to deal with a short-term problem that's not the responsibility of Reading's? My final comment on this is the town manager said at the board meeting in 2020, that you'll get a lot of emails from people when their cell service is disrupted. Well, here's what I would suggest how you might respond to that. First of all, they should call their carrier if their cell service isn't working properly. And secondly, if they're not happy with that response, tell them to switch to Verizon. Verizon isn't impacted by this project and they give great service. I'm going to move on now to the next part of my presentation. I want to talk about this RFP.
Am I in the right place, Mark?
I'm sorry.
Do you want me on the
Oh,
second
yeah.
slide?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. This slide just briefly talks about someone in Massachusetts. And as you can see here, it happened to be with a water tower that was on their property. And the solution, which is in the next to last sentence, Sprint wants to place now, because their antennas have to come off the water tank, Sprint wants to put a cell on wheels on the site, and the owner of the property wants to know how much rent they can charge him for that, while Sprint is looking for a new location to build a cell tower in that town. So thank you, Mark. So now I'm going to talk about the RFP. Yes, thank you. That's the slide I'd like. This RFP is very troubled. What you have in front of you is a list of all the RFPs in 2019 that are on the town's procurement webpage. You see that they're in numerical order. The last one was the 39th. You'll see all these asterisks in between a number of these RFPs. 12 of the 39 are not available for the public to see. They're not even listed on the webpage. One of them happens to be this RFP. So this RFP was put out there in November of 2019, and to this day is still not accessible to the public. Thanks to a couple of board members on our request, we were able to obtain the RFP. We read it. I would tell you, my wife, who's a really good lawyer, especially when it comes to reading and writing, within 5 minutes of reading that RFP, she blurted out, "This is unbelievable. There is no way the carriers would ever agree to this RFP." If I can go to the next slide, Mark. Here is a summary of the provisions of this RFP. What it basically says, what it puts on the carriers, if you want to bid on it, which they were non-responsive to, they have to pay for all the permitting. So there's your lawyers, your engineers, and your consultants. They have to then prepare the site, knock down a bunch of the trees that are on there, grade the ground. Then they have to probably install some type of cement pad 3 or 4 feet down. Then they have to build a cell tower. And as Ryan said, then they got to transfer the equipment back. All of the expenses for this are on them. Then they got to transfer the antennas over. Then after 2 years of building it, they got to tear it down, remove it from the site, and replace all the trees they took down, and return the site to its original condition. If it would cost the town, according to the town manager, $300,000 to build the cell tower he's proposed, I'm going to guesstimate that this would be over a $500,000 project for the cell carriers to build one day and tear down 2 years later, when a solution readily available to them is to bring a cell on wheels on the property. That's only if they need it. These companies are very adept, very sophisticated at managing this issue. Now, the question is with those conditions, right? And remember, in this RFP, you only have one option. It's to build to the specs of the proposal. 190-foot cell tower. You don't have the option to put a cell on wheels. You don't have the option to bring a crane onto the site which the town engineer mentioned as part of his presentation in 2018, would be the mechanism for relocating the antennas onto a crane on the site while the water project was being conducted. Or small cells. That's another option. None of these options are available in this RFP. It begs the question. Did the town manager, when he sent this RFP out that was hidden from the public, have any idea that the carriers would respond to this RFP the way they did? Let's look at some other facts surrounding this RFP. Who's the chief procurement officer in the town? It's the town manager. Who's been talking to the carriers for over 4 years? The town manager. Who's been pushing? Who is the #1 proponent of building a cell tower on this site? It's the town manager. If you just take the facts, the hidden RFP from the public, and just, if I can step back for a second, if that RFP had been listed on the webpage as it should have been, it would have been titled. There's a title to all the RFPs. That was in November of 2019. I can tell you between November of 2019 and June of 2020, someone would have caught that RFP. And the conversation at the board in June of 2020 would have been very different than what took place. Wrap all these facts together, apply some common sense. This RFP is a complete phony RFP. They knew when this RFP went out that it would get exactly the response. And here's the narrative it fits. This isn't to address self-service issues. This is to fit the narrative of the town manager. We have a self-service problem. The carriers won't address it, so we have to step in and build a cell tower. Those are the facts. That's my conclusion. You can respectfully disagree or not be respectful and disagree, but that's what this RFP is. I'm going to move on now to security. The town manager claims, yeah, you can read this stuff. I don't really have a security slide, but you can leave that up. The town manager has made the claim that based on a security study, which recommends that the antennas be taken off the water tower permanently, based on that, and based on the premise that when the workers go up on the water tank to conduct maintenance on their antennas, they're going to commit a terrorist act and poison the water in the tank. That's the underlying issue. So based on this security study, the recommendation is we shouldn't have these antennas on the water tank. In over 20 years that the antennas have been on the current water tank, I've lived here for 15, there's never been one issue of this security issue ever raised. But I know the chairman in particular likes alternatives. What are the alternatives for dealing with this security issue other than building a 190-foot water tank? They're very simple and they're right in front of us. There's lease agreements with the carriers. Why wouldn't we include provisions in those lease agreements? Number one, for security protocols. And number two, and this is what would definitely take care of the problem, liability provisions on the carriers in the event that any of their workers do any damage or commit some terrorist act. That would ensure that they would establish protocols to make sure that that never happens, because the liability exposure itself would drive them to do that. So that's one way. Another way is the town engineer in 2018 explained about this new bracketing system that would be part of the new water tank. So if that new bracketing, which actually takes the antennas off the tank, is what he explained. So if that new bracketing system doesn't address this security issue, did the town engineer go back to the designers and ask them if there were additional design elements that could be incorporated in that bracketing to ensure addressing this security issue. The last, and this might even be a better idea. In response to the security study that the town manager mentions, he issued an RFP for $2.5 million for security upgrades on town properties. This was after he got the security study, before the RFP for the cell tower went out, and then issued the RFP for the security upgrade after he sent out the RFP for the cell tower. In that $2.5 million appropriation, there's nothing in there to address security concerns that are raised on the water tank. Why wouldn't they? Things like surveillance cameras, motion detectors, they're all available in the $2.5 million RFP and appropriation to deal with security issues on town properties. The water tank was left off that for whatever reason. How am I doing for time, Mark?
About 10 minutes left.
Oh, great. I'm going to finish with this. That's 3 pages. I'm on my last page. I'm sure you're tired of listening to me. I'm getting tired of listening to myself. So let's talk process for a minute. At the July 2018 board meeting, the town manager said as follows: if those telecom companies want to build a cell tower, they do it. They have to go through the process, ask us, ask the neighbors, so on, so forth. This is on video, it's in the newspaper, and now it's on the record here tonight. At the June meeting of this year, the memo from the town engineer stated the following: that the town would be best to fund a temporary tower to avoid permitting and leasing concerns. So when the reporter called me on this, I pointed out that the town manager's plan here was to end run the entire process, that moving forward, if he's given the authority by the board to build a cell tower, there would be no more process. There would be no notice to abutters. There would be nothing before the planning board, no public hearings, no ZBA, no opportunity to be heard by the residents. The reporter called the town manager on that, and the town manager said, and this is quoted in the newspaper, that he would follow the same path a private organization would. So now here we are. The town has to do the same things that the carriers have to do. Same process, same expenses, same deal. Why would the town go through the time and expense of going through the process of building a cell tower when the carriers have to do the same thing? Why shouldn't that time and expense be their responsibility to build a structure for them to provide cell service? It doesn't make any sense. Remember the Venetian Moon example. I'm going to wrap up with this. We hope the select board will follow the example that the city of Peabody, local governing body, we sent you all an article a week or so ago, how the city of Peabody's local governing body has fought a 100-foot monopole being sited in a residential district by one of the carriers. They're taking that matter all the way to the Supreme Judicial Court. However, the result of that litigation is going to lead to probably an agreement as for an alternative. And I'll speak to the legal issue that Ryan referenced, but really didn't say anything about legal issues. That's the example. Local governing bodies, we depend on this board to represent us and look out for us. And I know it's a trying job. I would never want to do it. So, I commend all of you for what you do and spending this time doing this. But we really depend on you to look out for our neighborhoods. This isn't just where we, buy a home. This is where we live. the board should reject this cell tower proposal. We already have one. It's combined with the water tank. The new water tank has already been designed. The 2018 meeting, the engineer laid it out, already been designed with new bracketing to accommodate all the antennas on the existing water tank in place for an additional one. Thank you for your time on this so far. My wife is saying, talk about the legal issue. I will briefly. I would appreciate the opportunity to respond if the town manager and engineer have anything to say. I'd like the opportunity to respond to what they say. I tightened up my presentation. She timed me. It was like 25 minutes. I think I did it shorter than that. As far as a legal issue, I don't know what the town engineer is talking about. There are no legal issues here. The Federal Telecom Act basically gives cell carriers two rights. You can't prohibit them and you can't discriminate against them. You're not prohibiting them on the site. They're on the current water tank. These issues happen every day. It's part of the understanding in the law. If those antennas come off that tank, first of all, you haven't received any correspondence from the carriers threatening to sue the town when those antennas come off the water tank if you don't build them a cell tower, number one. Number two, if you were violating their rights in prohibiting it, what they would do is there would be a permit application filed at the building department for them to build a cell tower under their rights under the Federal Act. So this whole notion that there's potential litigation, it doesn't exist. I don't see where the carriers would have any standing under the current circumstances to bring a claim like that, especially when there are alternatives readily available to them. The crane that the town engineer mentioned, the cell on wheels that's available to everyone. It's an entire industry has been created for cell on wheels. So we can get deeper into the legal discussion if anybody wants, but you would have heard from the carriers and their lawyers if the town was heading in this has been around for 40 years now. If you were heading into a place where legal issues were going to crop up, you would have already heard about that. Again, thank you for visiting us. Thank you for listening to us. We welcome your questions.
Thanks, folks. So board members, what we had talked about doing next was listening to individual neighbors as kind of the next order of business. I'm going to suggest that that's exactly what we do. Everybody all right with that? Okay, so let's do this. There were a number of individuals that requested to speak. Why don't we, Caitlin, I don't know if you have a list of kind of when they requested and who is actually in the waiting room, but let's go through them one person at a time. They can't hear me, they're in the waiting room, but when they come in, I'm going to indicate, I think we have a lot of people that want to speak. So let's give them that opportunity and give them the 3 minutes that we suggested.
Okay. First up is Dan O'Keefe.
Hi, Dan. We have you on the meeting. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Please share your comments with us. What we do ask, though, is we have a number of people that would like to speak. If you can keep it to 3 minutes, it would be really appreciated.
Sure. I'll be very brief, and thank you for your time. I just wanted to come on to echo what Mark and Jackie have said so far. I've only been a resident for about 3 years, but we moved in knowing what the water tower was, and appreciate that. And it's our desire that it stays that way, as close as we can within reason. And I think that what they've put forth is a reasonable approach. I am not an engineer, I'm not a lawyer. So all I've been able to do is kind of take in what I've seen so far. And from what I've seen is the impetus should be put on the carriers to provide the service that we pay them for. I think that's a key point in this. I appreciate the desire of the town to work well with the carriers and to be a partner. But I think that it's something that it seems to me, and again, in my limited exposure to it, that these cells on wheels or other temporary solutions for temporary problems, as opposed to a permanent solution for a temporary problem. And I'll give back the rest of my time to let everybody else go. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan. Can I just ask your address?
Oh, sure.
I'm asking everyone that.
Yep, 34 Auburn Street.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Much appreciated. Caitlin, who's next? We'll ask you, Dan, is to chime off of this and go back to following it through either RCTV or Facebook or YouTube. If you don't mind.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, we have Colleen Lacey.
Great. Hi, Colleen. Colleen, can you hear us? Or the beach sounds could be loud in the background.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, thanks for joining. Please proceed. I would ask if you can keep to 3 minutes, we'd really appreciate it.
Sure. So I'm Colleen Lacey and I live at 9 Beacon Street. And I just wanted to thank you for taking the time for allowing us to speak tonight and consider all of our concerns. I wanted to let everyone know that I'm extremely opposed to the proposal of a separately constructed cell tower. It's an absolute eyesore, and there's nothing that can be done to beautify the area. As we stated earlier, it just does not belong in residential areas. I'm asking you, perhaps as a different solution, to consider putting this tower somewhere else as a separate entity from the water tower. I was reading the 1015 document, the question and answer section. Number 25 stated that the cell carriers have not expressed interest in other locations. As a town, have we done our due diligence to offer them a different location, as that can offer a standalone tower that has greater coverage for them, because that seems to be one of the issues. There are other areas in Reading that are less populated, and perhaps with elevation that could suffice. It would allow a cell tower with multiple carriers to be constructed and a water tower, a separate entity, without the supposed security, maintenance, legal issues that were talked about. I can't help to think when looking at the fiscal dollars collected from the revenue of these carriers. On page 72, granted it's 2020 numbers, it states that $145,000 is collected in revenue times 20 years, which is how long they've been up there. That seems enough to suffice to pay for the tower if that becomes an issue. I'm just asking, please explore other locations as an option. Mark also presented many great options as a neighborhood that, you know, we would be okay with. So just please consider other ideas than this cell tower. And I'd also like to ask that there's more transparent communication from town for town members for all future decisions that would impact neighborhoods like this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Thanks for joining us. We ask you to chime off this and go back to how you were following, and then we'll have the next person come join. Great, Caitlin, who is next?
Larry Hayes.
Larry Hayes.
For all future decisions that would impact neighborhoods like this one.
Hi, Larry, we can hear you. We don't yet see you. And can I ask also you turn off however you were watching the meeting while you're inside the Zoom?
Sure. For the record, my name is Larry Hayes. I live at 29 Beacon Street in Reading, actually right underneath the location of the proposed tower.
Larry, do you want to join? Do you want to join by video also? It's up to you, but I'm just, you're not on video currently.
Yes. I'm not sure how to do it, to be honest. I'm not too zooming.
Bottom left there, it probably is a camera with a line through it. If you just click on it.
Oh. There we go.
Great.
Excellent. For the record, my name's Larry Hayes. I live at 29 Beacon Street, right underneath the location of the proposed tower. I am actually quite familiar with the zoning bylaw regarding this. Quick story, in 2000, I've been here for 13 years. 2006, I was approached by a representative of T-Mobile to put a 150-foot tower on my property. And I'll be honest with you, I have clients that are landlords, as they call them, and I entertained the idea until I took a look at the zoning bylaw. And I knew that there wasn't a chance in hell that this would ever get passed if the carrier had to go through town and go through the process of the requirements of the zoning bylaw. I mean, specifically, the two issues I have a problem with are the required setbacks for the tower. I mean, 28 residential properties fall within what we call in the zoning bylaw, the fall zone of the tower. Those properties are on Auburn, Beacon, Bethesda, Chestnut, and Federal Street. And regards to the required setback, according to the town's own bylaw, 87 residential properties fall within the zoning setback on Auburn, Beacon, Bethesda, Chestnut, Federal, Locust, Main Street, and Parkview. Like was said earlier, quite honestly, we bought into this neighborhood 13 years ago with a water tower that has antennas on it. We were fine with that, but we're not fine with a 200-foot tower or however tall they're proposing they make this tower. I'll be honest, I'm just aggrieved that the method that they went through in getting this thing in front of the select board. I think it's, I thought it was just a little sneaky, to be honest with you. And that's about all I have to say. I am strongly opposed to a cellular tower going up in this neighborhood.
Thanks for participating, Larry. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We ask that you kind of chime out from here, and Caitlin will bring in the next person as well. And you can join back on RCTV or for other methods.
Carolyn Whiting.
Carolyn White, thanks. Hi, Carolyn. I think we may be able to hear you, but we don't yet see you if you'd like to join by video as well. Your choice.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Okay.
There you go.
How's that? All right. Okay, Carolyn Whiting. I live at 17 Chestnut Road, where I've lived for 35 years. I don't remember hearing about the initial wireless transmitters before they were installed on the water tower, but I was active in my neighborhood's effort to keep the third wireless communications company's transmitters from being installed on the water tower back in 1999 to 2000. We were initially able to convince the board to deny Sprint's application, but then after Sprint threatened to sue the town, the board gave in and the transmitters were installed. I still believe that it is not appropriate to allow wireless transmitters, regardless of whether they are located on a water tower or on a cell tower, within 1,500 feet of residences and schools. My first choice, therefore, would be to consult with experienced telecommunications lawyer Andrew Campanelli to find out whether it might be feasible to permanently remove the commercial transmitters from the water tower. According to Cecilia Doucette, Director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology, Mr. Campanelli indicates that the industry provides our towns with fraudulent information to lead them to believe that they have no recourse, and he has taken more than 7,000 individual and municipal cases and won 75 to 80% of them. I would be happy to provide contact information and additional information about his services if you would be interested in looking into this possibility. My next choice would be to keep the wireless transmitters on the water tower, either by leaving the current tower and the transmitters in place even after the tower is no longer used for water storage purposes, and build a new tower on a different footprint on the same lot, perhaps where the old Rocket water tower used to be, or by moving the transmitters to the new water tower. I am strongly opposed to having a permanent cell tower located on the Auburn Street lot in the middle of a residential neighborhood. I believe that having such a tower would have a detrimental effect on neighborhoods, health, property values, and aesthetic values. It could also potentially expose us to the risk of someday having additional carriers apply to have more transmitters installed on the new water tower, in addition to the ones on the proposed cell tower. I had a layer of metal installed under the shingles on my roof many years ago in an effort to reduce the impact of the transmitters on my health, but I don't know of anything I could do to prevent the damage to property values and aesthetic values. Thank you for your consideration of my views.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Karen, did you have a question? I'm sorry. I saw your hand. No, sorry. Okay, great. Carolyn, if we could ask you to, nope, thank you, already done. Great, who's next?
Ann Dillaway.
Ann Dillaway.
Ann Dillaway.
Ann Dillaway.
Okay, let me mute you first. Let me just, okay.
I can hear you doing the right stuff, Ann.
Yep, I'm there. Wait a minute.
Great, you're with us. We see you and hear you both.
You see me. Okay, great. My name is Ann Dillaway. I live at 32 Beacon Street. I'm sorry for the blackness behind us. Anyway, I live at 32 Beacon Street. I have lived here. This is actually the house I grew up in. My only concern is my husband and I, my husband is retiring this year. I shouldn't say my only concern, but one of my concerns. My husband's retiring at the end of this year, and I'll be retiring next year. And we want to kind of sell our house and move to be at a local place where we can be between my daughter in New Hampshire and my daughter here in Reading. Long story short, I had a realtor here the other day to give us an idea of how to get ready for, you know, the sale of the house and so forth. And I asked her, I said, well, they're thinking of putting in 150, 170, 100, whatever, 200-foot tower, cell tower. And she said, well, most people would have a problem with just the water tower, let alone a cell tower. So my concern is, yes, we have money set aside for our retirements, but we were also relying on a good portion of the sale of our home to help supplement that. And I'm very, very concerned that this cell tower is just going to add more detrimental value to our home. And there's a lot of people, I think, around here who are going to be relying on their home for putting their kids through college and so on and so forth, for equity and so forth. I'm just really very upset about this because it's really hit at a very hard time with the COVID going on and everybody's had a loss of income. So I just asked the select board to really consider, would you want a tower like that abutting your property? Because we are right next door to the Delaney's and it's going to have a huge, huge impact on us as well. So I'm more on the property value thing tonight, but I do totally oppose of this. It does not belong in a residential area. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ann. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm going to ask you just to click out and we'll bring the next person in.
Okay, Bob Connor.
Bob Connor.
But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ann. Thanks for joining us this evening. Hi, Bob. This is Mark Doxer. We're hearing you. We don't yet see you. And can we ask that you turn down either RCTV or however you were attending the meeting before?
Sure.
Whoop, we have you in kind of a silhouette at the moment. Oh no. Bob, are you connected your sound directly in or using a headset perhaps?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, 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 at regular speed.
Let's leave it at that. Robert Connor, 7 Beacon Street. to follow up with Mrs. Dillaway, Mary Hughes, this is in the Selectmen's notes from January of '99. She was trying to sell a house on 23 Chestnut Road. And when she disclosed they were transmitters on the house, the people literally refused to buy the house. So when I read the address section of the Globe, which has the real estate advertised in the area, they show beautiful developments in Plymouth, Rhode Island, the Maine coast. They mention all the amenities that they have, golf, hiking trails, etc. They never brag about the 200 cell foot towers that they have on the property for obvious reasons. Yes, I'm being facetious. So research indicates that 90% of home buyers and renters are less interested in properties near cell towers and would pay less for a property in close vicinity to cellular antennas. Documentation of a price drop up to 20% is found in multiple surveys. The Housing and Urban Development Department, HUD, long considers cell towers hazards and nuisances. So let's do some quick math. If 200 homes are affected by these towers with their property value, say by $100,000, that comes to a total of $20 million. If the affected people sell their homes at a reduced price, the town would be forced to assess their homes for these reduced values. If they didn't, I would expect a lot of legal action on the part of the sellers who have been incorrectly taxed over the years. Finally, another survey by the Business Wire, which is run by Berkshire Hathaway, which is now also in the real estate business, was conducted. They surveyed 1,000 people. 94% of the people said that if there were cell towers in the neighborhood, they would be less willing to pay for it. 79% said under no circumstances would they ever purchase or rent a property within a few blocks of a cell tower. So I'm opposed to this for many reasons already stated, and I just wanted to highlight the impact to the town on property values, because they will certainly not be able to assess the properties in Reading at the value. One survey in California said within a quarter of a mile, if you can see a cell tower, it affects the property. So that's pretty much what I have to say.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for participating tonight. Okay, who do we have? Bob, if we can ask you to chime out this way and then go back to however you were following it, we appreciate that. Oops, sorry.
All right, Amy Ward.
Amy Ward.
All right. Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Amy Ward, I live at 15 Beacon Street. I live at Beacon and Auburn, so the water tower is in my front yard. That's what I see when I walk out my front door. I moved to Reading 15 years ago. I've lived in this house. I knew there was a water tower there. There's trees around it, and in the wintertime, it pretty much kind of blends into winter. So it's not so bad. I'm very opposed to having any cell tower put in my front yard. There's no way you can dress it up and make it look pretty. I mean, I can see the water tank when I'm driving around the lake in Wakefield, and that's 110 feet from Wakefield. So I can't imagine what this eyesore is going to look at, you know? I live here, I pay taxes. I'm wondering if the town is going to come around, like Bob said, and reassess my property lower. I mean, how much money will the town lose if they have to reassess all our property values? It's going to far outweigh any money they make from having cell carriers. I have Verizon. Verizon's not on that water tank. So there's nothing. And even the coverage that is shown in that map for the other cell carriers of what a cell tower might do for them, doesn't expand that much coverage. There's really no point in doing this. It doesn't belong in our neighborhood. I don't want it. I forgot my other talking points. But
Well, no worries.
it's been a long day of work. I work 2 jobs. I work as a nurse and a massage therapist. My husband works 2 jobs. We work a lot to be able to live in this town and send our kids to this school. And it's really not fair that I am going to have to suffer after living here and buying a house. I didn't buy a house on a busy street because I didn't want a busy street. I didn't buy a house in front of a cell tower because I didn't want a house in front of a cell tower. And now I'm being having that forced upon me. And I'm going to lose all the equity that we have put into this house and all of the hard work that we have put in. So it's just not necessary. So that's all I have to say. I'm not going to take up anybody else's time.
Thank you for joining, Amy.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You as well.
I'm going to leave meeting.
Yep, thank you. Caitlin, who's next?
Lisa Goldsmith.
Lisa Goldsmith. Hi, Lisa. We can see you and let's see if we can hear you.
Hey, Mark. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Lisa Goldsmith. I live at 16 Parkview Road. So I'm a little downhill from kind of diagonal from the existing water tower. So the nice thing about that for me is that when for most of the year, the trees actually kind of obscure most of the water tower. I don't really see it very much. I do see it when I drive by. I was aware there was a water tower there when I bought the property back in 2007. I understand there is a need for replacing the existing water tower. I am fully in support of that. I understand that there are already some cell wires on the existing tower. I am not thrilled about the fact that there are existing wires on them, but I do understand the need for them. I would be fully in support of replacing the existing tower and replacing the wires as currently exists. To add a close to 200-foot tower in the middle of the neighborhood, there is no way to avoid that. There is no way you can go by and not see that walking out the front door. It's not just Parkview. I think you'll be able to see it all over the neighborhood. It is going to be a huge eyesore. To that point, and sort of related to the issues that other people have expressed with the communication about this, I found out about this whole project because of postings on Facebook in the wedding parents board. I had no notice whatsoever. Conversely, earlier this year, one of our neighbors on Auburn Street was going for a zoning variance to construct a farmer's porch on his house. That there was plenty of notice about. There was plenty of opportunity to weigh in on it. I will add that ironically, that variance was denied. I don't know exactly what the reasoning was for the denial on that. I do know that he had to go for the variance because his house, it would have exceeded the setback, the front setback, by 2 feet. This is a matter of the fact that his house was just placed was originally sited too close to the front property line. So my question is, if something that would have, added to the functionality of that house, would have added to the aesthetics of the neighborhood, why that was denied, and yet this is being considered, it just boggles my mind. I won't speak to the property values. I think plenty of people have spoken about that, but obviously as someone who is approaching her retirement, I have a partner who will probably be retiring within the next couple of years. That is a huge concern as well. The last thing, I don't know if there's been any discussion of potential health impacts, but what I am reading is that even if it's not anything as drastic as God forbid, cancer. There are well-documented studies that show that there's an increase in things like headaches and irritability. And I'm happy to send a link to the board that discusses all of the potential health risks of living within a quarter mile of a cell tower as being proposed. So my request is that you stick to the proposal to replace the water tower, put the, do the temporary measures of a cow or the crane for interim coverage while the construction is taking place on the new water tower, and then replace the wires that exist right now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Sure.
Who is next, Caitlin?
Mike Lacey.
Mike. Hi, Mike. I think we have you on sound, but not video yet.
Yep.
There you go.
How you doing? Mike Lacey. I live at 9 Beacon Street. I'll just make this really quick. I oppose the construction of the cell tower all inclusively. I do not appreciate the lack of transparency amongst town officials. I did not buy this house in 2012 to walk out of my front door to be greeted by a massive cell tower. When I ask you guys a real quick question, any of you guys want this in your front yard? Any of you guys want to pay a lot of money for a house to have a cell tower put up in your front yard? Auburn and Beacon Street is in the Mass Pike. It's not the middle of the woods. Same page, Ryan? I have 2 young kids, 7 and 3. We talked about the zoning and fall zone. I don't want to be considered to be the point of the 0.0001%. Just simply doesn't make sense. Please consider our safety and my investment in my property. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for joining us this evening. Who is next, Caitlin?
Anastasia De Silva.
Anastasia De Silva. Hi, Anastasia. I think we can hear you. If we can ask you to turn down the sound from your other device, and if you'd like to join by video, to click on the camera to start it.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Hi,
Welcome.
everyone. Thank you so much for giving us a chance to speak tonight. My name is Anastasia De Silva. I live at 43 Chestnut Road. And along with the rest of the crew around, just wanted to put my 2 cents in. Not a big fan of having a big, most likely bigger than the water tower, cell tower up at the top of my street. I think Dan O'Keefe had the best line, for me at least: we don't need a permanent solution to a temporary problem. I understand the need for replacing and fixing and dealing with the water tower, but I don't see any reason that we can't just put them right back up there when they're done and figure out something to do into the interim. I don't think anybody would want a cell tower in a residential neighborhood, and I don't think it belongs there. So thank you very much, and that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Anastasia. Thank you for joining tonight and sharing.
Thank you.
Who is next, Caitlin?
Mike Spleen.
Hi, Mike, you're on mute. Oh, there you go. Welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, Select Board. Thank you for having us. My name is Mike Splain, 32 Chestnut Road. When we moved here in 2017, we knew the existing water tower had cell antennas on it. We accepted that we would be able to see it from our front and backyard. If there was a cell tower in addition to that water tower rising many feet above it, we certainly would not have purchased our home. It's worth repeating that the photo that for the comparable Peabody composite site attached to the packet shows the cell service attached to that tower, which makes me question why we need anything different. The cell tower will negatively affect our property values. And from my understanding, the cell tower is being proposed in a way that allows the town to ignore building, safety, and even notification guidelines that the rest of us must follow. It is being proposed in a rushed way that lacks transparency and unfortunately leads to mistrust between residents and town leadership. I hope the Select Board can slow down this process and reject any proposal to put any permanent or temporary structure on the site. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
Alrighty, Lindsay Fitzgerald.
Lindsay, I'm not seeing your microphone here. I don't know if you're hearing us. Okay, I think we have sound, and yeah, try clicking your camera. Great. Hi there,
Hi.
welcome.
Thank you. My name is Lindsay Fitzgerald. I live at 16 Circle. I've been a Reading resident for 26 years. I am strongly against the cell phone tower being constructed on Auburn Street. Cell phone towers do not belong in residential neighborhoods. They are a huge eyesore, which leads to decreased home value and are a safety issue. This is a tight-knit neighborhood with families, children, the elderly, and pets. Putting a cell tower in the proposed spot serves as a huge safety risk to our community. There are numerous other sites the town could explore to put the cell phone tower. The town of Reading should put the safety of its residents above all else. And in conclusion, I strongly believe that cell phone towers do not belong in residential neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Who's next, Caitlin?
That's it.
There was a request from Larry Mice. I don't know if you saw that one, if he is in the waiting room.
I have no one in the waiting room.
Okay, why don't we, tell you what, let's shift, if we could, to board feedback, right? Select board discussion. Why don't the five of us have a little discussion about kind of where we are, thoughts, questions. I appreciate that staff and we are kind of all in listening mode so far. But what I'd suggest here is that the board have a chance to ask some questions and discuss this issue a little bit. So I would be open to anyone who would like to speak from the board. Carlo.
I'll start off. Thank you for everyone who made their comments tonight, and thank you to Mark and Jackie for the presentation. I've read through all the materials, got caught up to speed from 2016. Even though I lived here, it wasn't not my neighborhood and wasn't aware of all this going back that far. One thing that caught my attention was the word urgent for the water tank. So to me, urgent means, pretty quick. So I don't know where we are with that from 2016 to now. what could or what may happen to our water tank if we still keep kicking this down the road? Because urgent to me means urgent. I'll leave that for Ryan or for Bob, I guess.
Ryan or Bob, do you want to talk about timing?
Yeah, Jane or Chris can chime in. Urgent did mean urgent. It still means urgent. We've never gone this long before, to my knowledge, delaying repainting and taking care of some of the issues we have. It's not a question of safety for the water supply or for the residents, but there is some concern that federal or state authority might come in and not look kindly on this situation. We would not want to have to take this water tank offline, not at our own schedule, because it does provide backup water supply pressure and especially fire flow as may be needed. So it's an important resource to maintain. We would much prefer to schedule the downtime for such a water tank and not have it sort of dictated to us, if you will. Certainly DPW folks can add.
No, Bob, I think that's spot on.
Other questions, comments from the board? Vanessa?
Just a question on how we're going to proceed. So are we waiting for additional residents who are going to provide their opinions, or are we sort of officially opening up board discussion?
We're officially opening up board discussion. We have heard from everyone that asked to speak at this point.
I have two questions, and then I hope that from the staff side that they'll address the questions raised by Jackie and Mark. So is it true that the town staff has indicated that the cell on wheels is too heavy as for a temporary structure for its current location? That's question one.
Given our conversations that we had with our consultant that was helping us with the cell tower issue, or just transferring them off in the time being, and with our conversations with the carriers, multiple conversations that we've had with carriers, the COW system, because there are 3 carriers up there and using the same equipment that they have, one COW system would not be substantial enough to move all that equipment over. And there's just certainly not enough room there for multiple cows. And so that also leads to the discussion of, we also brought up, you're absolutely right, about the crane. And that was one of the original discussions that we did have with the carriers. And that didn't seem to be also viable at the time, and which led us to a more structural solution, so to speak, even in a temporary manner. So it was not incorrect that those are certainly options, that we did have conversations with, and they were on the table. And unless things have changed with the technology, up until recently, they still were not going to solve the solution of moving them off the tank at the time.
So you're saying, so the cows are not an option and the crane is not an option?
According to both the carriers and the consultant, yeah.
We did hear from a resident who indicated that it is possible that the cell tower or cell providers could amplify use of nearby towers in order to compensate. Has that been discussed?
That has not come up as far as what they do as far as amplifying. That was never discussed on a method that they could use to supplement the gap. I can certainly go back and ask in more detail. But again, that over this time period, we've been working very closely, trying to collaborate, trying to find the right solution to move forward. And that was never an option that was available, or the one that they offered.
I would add that years ago, we did discuss the location and how it's similar or different to peer communities so that when we did our research, we get some feedback. And they said that kind of a straight north-south shot of Route 28 was far different than most other locations in other towns and cities, except for the east-west along 128. You know, you see down in Norwood and Needham, some of the, structures down there. So that the connectivity, if you will, of this location was much more important to them than it typically might be. We discussed small cell at the time, knowing that was a technology moving forward, and they said that that could supplement at some point, but it absolutely would not replace what they needed. So we've had a discussion, but Ryan's right. We never said, do you have existing structures on the north-south that you could somehow modify or change that could temporarily replace this? That's just not something anyone ever brought up.
So have any discussions been held with the neighbors? I understand there's a large, it does have an Eleanor, but there's a large lot sort of up behind Beacon. I'm familiar with the area. Or the neighbor who had spoken earlier who had been approached. Has there been any effort to identify if we can put cows in those areas as a temporary measure?
We did. I'm not sure if it's the same lot. I'm guessing probably not, but we did ask the carriers to look at Oakland Road, the land the town owned. And, that's nearer to the high school, so it has other certainly negative issues. They said the elevation wasn't sufficient, even though it's not that far away.
And what about
Bob,
the adjoining?
If memory serves me correctly with the cows, there are some additional height issues with those, and that drops off in topography. So they have that bowl issue that the high school does sit in. So they were discussed in detail, no, but it was discussed and they were pointed in that direction to take a look at it.
So just so that I'm clear, we're talking about potentially putting in a permanent cell tower that may become obsolete before the rental fees can pay for the tower itself, having it be potentially, though from the report that I saw in the packet, the height of it is still to be determined, but still significantly higher than what we're facing now, all because we're unable to identify a temporary solution while the new tower goes up?
I would say that the tower structurally is the same and has always been discussed as a temporary solution. There was a point years ago where a prior board asked us to look at what's the difference between temporary and permanent, and would there be some advantage to doing a permanent tower? But as of 2 years ago, that was taken off the table. Now it's still structurally the same, so you build a temporary tower, you can leave it there, but that was never the intent, or at least not recently the intent. So we are trying to fix this temporary issue of, I don't know, unknown magnitude. Worst case, Ryan says almost 2 years.
Right, and I just want to talk to that about that time frame, Bob. To replace a tank, ideally with no problems, we may be looking at, if everything is perfect, 4 to 6 months. Okay, with markets, steel markets the way they are, with the time of construction, with unforeseen delays, we could be upwards to 2 years. And again, I mentioned that time frame because I just want to make sure everyone has clear expectations of how dynamic construction can be. And I don't want to put something out there and then have them realize that it's just not going to be that fast. But this has, like Bob said, this has always been tried to be a temporary solution. But it's really important that when we go through this process, and that's what we're trying to do, is that we inform you that this temporary solution that we've tried to come to is almost going to be an order of magnitude as the same as a permanent. And that's really what we tried to explain at the last meeting. Certainly we weren't proposing or looking for a proposal for a permanent at that point, but we still have to temporarily move them off the tank in whatever fashion that may be.
So thank you for answering my questions. As the only member of the board who was here when this was discussed a couple of years ago, I have significant reservations about the turn this has taken. I am not comfortable at this time. I know Mark said, you know, we're not voting on anything, but my stance as one board member is that I am not comfortable with potentially creating a separate, significantly taller cell tower, especially considering the original proposal did not include a permanent structure. So I would like to see, and I don't know how my fellow board members feel, but you know, we have heard from residents, specifically Jackie and Mark, who have put forward alternate solutions, and I would very much like to see the town pursue some of them before our next discussion, and to have those put in front of the board for review. And if that includes speaking to neighbors for cows, I know there's some potential issues there, reaching back out to the cell providers to see how else they can do it. We cannot possibly be the only town who needs to take down these structures for, even if it is 2 years. It strikes me as impossible that we are the only town that has to take them down and doesn't have a place to put them. The cell providers have these towers all over the country, world. It seems like we're trying to solve their problem for them, and I don't think that's our role. Thank you.
Karen or Ann, do you want to chime in? Karen.
Yeah, Vanessa, you just got to what I've been thinking. I would like to turn this conversation around. I'm very disappointed at what was decided by a prior board in 2018 and the assurances that were given to neighbors after all that effort. And I would absolutely feel the same way if we were trying to put a cell tower in my front yard and an RFP was not published. And I found out about an accident after it had already been decided that that would not be pursued, to 3 years, have it come back again and not be notified. I would be absolutely horrified. So I'm very, 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 very upset about the way this has worked out. But to get to Vanessa's point, I would like to turn this around. I would like us to stop trying to solve the carrier's problem. It's their equipment, they're their customers, they're their profits, they're their revenues. I want them to solve this problem. As a landlord, we can try to work with them, but basically we need to say, hey, we've enjoyed having your business and having you on our water tower. And guess what? We're putting in a new one and you're gonna need to find a workaround for this period. And then we'll be glad to have you back again. And in the meantime, one of my questions that I don't think was answered in the packet tonight was, you know, we as a community need to have a large cell versus small cell strategy. And I would still like to see us do that. And this can be a trigger that makes that go forward. But I can't say anymore that we need to treat our neighbors and our citizens better than this. When we have a resident coming in and saying that he was approached by a cell carrier and said, oh, that'd be great, I'd love to get some revenue, and then took a look at our own bylaws and determined there was no way that that could ever happen. And yet that is exactly what the town now appears to be trying to do to community, that it's just not a good thing to happen. So
I need to respond to that.
Hold on, Bob, I'm speaking, please.
Okay.
You guys have worked very hard on this, and I do understand that. And I absolutely believe that we need that water tower done. This has gone on long enough, and that is a critical resource. But this is a problem that those businesses need to solve, not the town. Thank you.
Mark, if I may.
Please.
When the library was built, I insisted it go through the full CPDC review process. That was the first municipal building that has ever done that. Earlier, Mark Delaney read a comment from me at one of the meetings that I said the same thing. Let them go through the process. He then asserted that I was doing some sneaky backhand maneuver to avoid that, and then cited a comment from the newspaper where I again said, I'm fully intending to do this. Mark, if you have any facts to back up your assertion in the middle, I'd be thrilled to hear them because I know I have never even thought that, let alone said that. And that speaks to character, not process.
Mark, sorry to interrupt. Larry Muse has contacted us a couple of times. He says he hasn't been given the link and he wasn't given an opportunity to speak earlier, so I just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm aware of that. I think that when the board's finished discussion, we can allow him to come in. But we're kind of right in the middle of something. So, so folks, just a comment. I think that we're here to come up with solutions this evening and ideas to how to take this forward and what our next steps need to be. There have been raised some other concerns, and I think it's important to address them. But I think that if we attempt to have that discussion now, we will just completely derail anything that we're moving toward. So I would really strongly suggest let's focus on the issues that we have here in terms of what we can do and how we can do it. And if there are other issues, maybe we're going to take them offline to see, if that's what they need to be, but I don't think that they should be here. Anne hasn't spoken and I haven't spoken. So Anne, please.
Okay. To speak to Carlo's point about timeliness and urgency around the water tank itself, I think that is an important issue, but it's also may end up driving a timeline for getting answers to some of our other questions, but I don't know that it drives the solution necessarily. I think it's an important thing to keep in mind and make sure that we are taking care of that need, but it doesn't necessarily drive the solution here. I just wanted to recognize that there was not adequate public notification in advance of the June meeting. And I did go back and watch the 2018 meeting when residents in a previous iteration of the board, there has been much turnover on the board. I think to the detriment in this process because we don't have the depth of institutional knowledge bringing us to where we are today. But I did note that in the 2018 meeting that residents were assured that they would be kept in the loop as this moved forward. And I lament that did not happen and that I did not ask more questions during the June meeting. We are where we are now. And I always appreciate the town's efforts to collaborate. So, to the extent the town has been seeking to collaborate with carriers, I would ask that now going forward, we collaborate as much, if not more, with our residents and in pursuing some of the alternative solutions to see where we can get. I had a question for Bob and Ryan about a paragraph that's in the FAQs or the questions that the board had come up with that I was hoping you could unpack a little bit for me. It's speaking to the conversations with the carriers. I can certainly, I don't really know what their perspective is. Clearly they have, obligations to their shareholders and their own financial interests, and they're going to be pursuing those. But specifically, let me just in ongoing discussions with the 3 cell carriers on the water tank, as well as one additional vendor strongly wishing to be added if capacity could be increased, town staff learned of the financial considerations of that industry. All 4 carriers could more easily fund annual operating costs than a one-time request for capital, even such a small one as less than $500,000 to build a cell tower, whether temporary or permanent. I mean, I don't know what that means. I mean, I think of course they would prefer not to take on the additional financial responsibility because no one and no company wants to take on additional financial responsibilities that somebody else would be willing to take on. But I didn't know if you could could clarify that or unpack it a little bit more to let us know what was the substance of that conversation?
Sure, I can do that. The first distinction to be made is that obviously these are large international corporations. They have some differences, they have some similarities. One of the similarities is that they have a process structure around capital that is much like we do in Reading. It's a once or twice a year thing. So if they want to receive any funds from a capital project, it has to take a great deal of planning and discussion and prioritization from the entire global organization. And that's one group of people. The folks we are dealing with are more the technicians on the ground, if you will, and they tend to deal more with their local operational people that also have a budget. And it doesn't matter which number is bigger, it's just two different processes. So the capital request is a much more cumbersome one for them organizationally. And the other alternatives are much simpler. They can go to their local office and have that discussion with that local office. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so basically they just have to run it up the food chain or the flagpole that it's not a local decision. It's a multinational corporation having to run it up to the highest levels.
Yeah, I can even go further and say one of them expressed the interest and ability to pay more through the more flexible process than they otherwise might pay through the inflexible one, that it wasn't the amount of dollars being spent. It was the process that they had to use.
Okay, thank you.
You all set in?
Yeah, for the moment at least.
Okay, so let me chime in if I could as well then, so that each of us will have an opportunity here. So I agree with a lot of the discussion so far that the issue really is the carriers more than ours in terms of dealing with it. There are a few constraints we have to think about, but I really think we need to revisit all of our discussions with these folks about cows, small cell, whatever those options are, and find out whether or not any of them really are even interested in pursuing that, or if they just kind of sit on the sidelines until things are fixed. Without asking each of them individually, I don't know the answer to that. So we should see what that looks like. That's number one. Number two, I hear the legal questions back and forth. We obviously should just check in with town council and just understand what level of exposure we'd be opening ourselves up to, if any, especially where it's a temporary disruption. It's not a denial of the ability to be on the tower. So let's just make sure we understand what that is. Number three is we do have residents and businesses who have become reliant on cell service and have eliminated home phones and hardline, or sorry, I don't know the right words, but whatever the landlines, I think is what it is, and have gone to cell service. So, you know, I think as much as I want to put it 100% onto the other carriers, you know, there's still service to some residents that we have to be thinking about as well. So to work with them, I think, is the solution, as opposed to just kind of, you know, run away as fast as we can. So, you know, there may be a combination kind of solution that could take place, a cow, some small cell, some ignoring for a period of time. You know, as it relates to the time frame we're talking about, so I appreciate that it could take 2 years, and that would really be, you know, difficult, and you know, hopefully that's, you know, the creek don't rise and everything on that one. And 4 to 6 months is really maybe too rosy in terms of what's going to take place. So somewhere in between is probably where it lies. And I would encourage us to take the time now to have these discussions with the carriers, to get this legal opinion, and to see if we can come back in a modest period of time. Perhaps it brings us to a December meeting, and have those answers, have those options in front of us, and then be able to kind of direct what's going to happen. The other thing, and I want to piggyback on everybody's point, but Carlo, the urgent discussion and the water tank, this needs to get going. It's not like we can just kind of hang out and, you know, if that were the case, it wouldn't be urgent. We need to get that figured out. And again, the issue is taking the equipment off. I don't know if the equipment that they put on is now 20 years old. And if it is, if the new transmitters are a different size or have different characteristics. So this stuff, you know, to me seems old in an industry that's changing really, really quickly. So I wonder what's going on with that also. And it's worth understanding that from these folks also. What are the other solutions when they're faced with, hey, you know, you're going to be down for however long it takes to build this tower. I think I'm pretty convinced that it would, you know, unless there's something in that security study that says you just can't put the equipment on there, I would be inclined to look at that solution, the solution of putting the equipment back on. So anyway, sorry. So now that's kind of my piece. So what I would suggest is we think about what exact next steps would we want to take here, and when would we want to get them done? Vanessa, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Then Vanessa, why don't you go ahead then, Bob?
Thanks, Mark. So to your earlier statement about needing to find a way forward, I am fully in agreement with that. I agree with identifying what we want the next steps to be. I also think we need to recognize shortcomings that have come up as part of this process. It allows us to acknowledge why we're here and how we ended up here. You know, we owe residents transparency in government, and it's an area that the town has repeatedly failed at, leaving this board unable to make fully informed decisions. That is a huge problem. This discussion has to reflect both how we got here and what our next steps are. I agree. This conversation has been going on for 4 years. We need to take action before we have a serious problem. But I am tired of having the same issue. We cannot keep having residents come in front of us saying, you didn't tell us what the town was planning on doing. So I don't want to plow ahead and then face this again next month with another issue comes up. We cannot keep functioning like this.
I think that we do need to separate the issues, but we also need to find a way that we don't find ourselves back with residents having been challenged to communicate, for us to communicate with them. We know it is an ongoing issue. It's an ongoing issue for, you know, many activities of the town. It's an ongoing issue just in getting information out to residents in general, but it isn't working, and there's no reason for it to continue that way. We need to find some solutions to it. So I am fully in support of that discussion. I think it's a separate discussion from this one, but not one that's like, well, let's just deal with it sometime in the future. I think we got to come to it pretty quickly. Bob, you had comments.
Yeah, I certainly respect the fact the board doesn't want to vote tonight, and I understand that, but I just want to summarize what I've heard, and I would ask the board if they disagree to say so. I believe every board member has indicated an acceptance of some temporary measure and then equipment going back on a new water tower. That question is very important to how we proceed. So I just asked the board, if anyone disagrees with that, please let us know, rather quickly.
Oh, so I see two hands. Carla, you go first.
First, to answer Bob's question, I'm okay with that as far as going back on the water tank, as the residents have mentioned, but I want to bring up Mark's point from earlier, and maybe I'm naive, because I'm a business owner, and if I want something done, I get it done. I talk to my vendors, but if we say as a town, we're breaking ground in May, this is when we're breaking ground. You give them ample notice. Why is it then our problem? That's what I can't understand. Like Mark said, this happens all over the world. And like Vanessa said, we're not the only town that has done this. So I'm not maybe asking for an answer, but if we say we're breaking ground in May and you give them 60-day, 90-day notice, I think they know what to do. Yes, we may have to have some solutions for them for the cow or for other opportunities, but again, maybe I'm naive. I'm not in town government, but it doesn't seem that hard, and we're not the first ones to do it. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I think most of the board is in agreement with take the equipment off, put newer, better equipment on the new water tower and let's get this going. I mean, I know we're not focused on capital right now, but this was approved many years ago. And tomorrow night, I was going to bring up other capital issues that I'm afraid we're going to neglect and you know, get bitten, you know what, later for it. So I like to say, let's set a date to break ground. We need a water tank. We've needed it for years, and let the chips fall where they may. It is temporary service. Without temporary service, we don't have we lose service for a little bit, but we need to move forward. You know, Vanessa brought up a lot of great points. Everyone's got up a lot of great points, but we're just, you know, in December, what are we going to accomplish? So if step one tonight is the 5 of us agree, new water tank, equipment off, equipment on, that's step 1. Step 2 for me is when are we going to break ground? And that's it. And then we move forward and we figure it out. And the carriers will figure it out because that's what they do for a living. We're the landlord. So we're going to break the lease, renew the lease. I mean, it's, you know, it's frustrating. And I don't even live in that neighborhood. So it's frustrating. So I think let's have that discussion right now, Mark, if that's okay with you, for the 5 of us, about, you know, separate structure, temporary, permanent, or new water tank, back on the water tank. That's what we need to discuss tonight. Like Bob said, then they have a path to go down. Thank you.
Vanessa.
Thank you, Carlo. You summed it up beautifully. I fully agree. The only thing I would, the breaking ground date for anyone who's, you know, tried to do any construction on their homes, big or small. Supply chains are really disrupted right now. So Ryan, if you set a date to break ground, I'm not going to hold you to it. Just acknowledging what construction is these days. Beyond that, fully agree. The only question I have left, Bob, because I know you've mentioned this, security, it's come up. I want to make sure that if there are any security concerns, that the board has a chance to address them now, before another proposal is put in front of us and then security comes up again. So are we able to address the security concerns with the standalone water tower, which essentially is the arrangement we have right now?
If I may, Mark. I don't remember my exact email to you, but I think I said, you know, the best security solution is not to have the equipment on the tank, but we can proceed in any event. It's just common sense that if you don't have someone walking around your water tank, you're better off. But that doesn't mean, as someone mentioned, you know, it's been this way for a long time. We can continue. And, you know, we might put in additional security measures, and that's really not relevant to the decision, I guess I'll say.
We could look at some of the things that Mark Delaney mentioned too, about, you know, what responsibility is of and liability belongs to the carrier to provide some.
Yeah, that was an interesting idea and one I had not thought of at all. So certainly, you know, I'd run that past town council and see if we can get somewhere with that.
If we could do that, that would be great.
So, Bob, did you have other, you asked for a sense of the board. I think you got a sense of the board that that solution is preferred on water tank. I think that we've identified a couple of the things that we'd like to have pursued also. I think Vanessa's suggestion, Carlos' suggestion, in terms of prioritizing the tank project and getting it going is spot on. I think that we do want to check with town council on the 2 issues that I think we've talked about here, just to make sure that we haven't opened ourselves up to something we don't know about, just to kind of confirm our position in the situation. And then I think giving the carriers notice so that they can decide what their temporary solutions are going to look like. Probably the more notice, the better. You know, I think once we're aligned, and I would suggest that what would happen in December is that we would, I guess, take more formal action if that's what's needed, and have feedback from the carriers on some of the potential opportunities here. Again, it may turn out that not all of them want to do anything, or maybe none of them, or they have mitigation that they can do. And it would be great to understand what those questions are, what those opportunities would be. I would just feel a little uncomfortable just kind of having everything wash out for 2 years. I think that, again, most people I know don't have a home phone anymore, and a lot of businesses don't have landline service. And I don't want to be in a situation where we've kind of put them into a much more difficult spot without having looked at some other solutions. And
just also for December, targeted notice of our meeting and discussion to neighbors.
so would this in fact move to a public hearing format if we do it that way? Or is it still kind of in the land of discussion and a board vote?
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I just want to caution you that December may or may not be realistic. You know, you've asked us to do a fair amount of work. One of them is to get a water tank designed to put equipment back on, which I'm not sure if we have it. So, you know, we'll circle back as quickly as possible. You know, with all the answers, I guess I'll say.
Great.
Could we remember that in December, 3 of your 4 meetings are budget related, so there's not a lot of room there, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe what we could do is ask for kind of an update on what the timeline would look like. You know, maybe we can do that in the next few weeks if that's doable.
Yeah, anytime. Yep.
That would be very helpful, and then we can more accurately understand what we need to do. And I think that if you're in need of a formal vote, then we should schedule that sooner than later. Again, not on the agenda for tonight, though.
Yeah, nothing would thrill me more to get the water tank replacement project moving. And I don't want to say this, you know, because I'm a worrywart, but what I don't want is a court injunction to stop that part of the process. So I just want to say that. I'm not threatening anything. I'm not saying, you know, the fact that the equipment will go back on is a huge plus legally, as opposed to just throwing them off. But I do need to talk to town council, because we can't have the main project at risk because of legal issues. At least you have to be aware of that before any decisions are made.
Agreed. And there may be other ways to mitigate. If there were a problem, maybe there's a way to mitigate that through discussion, as opposed to just kind of saying, no, here it is, we're done. It's all on you. I saw lots of hands. Sorry, I saw Karen. Sorry, I saw Ryan first, then Karen, then Vanessa. Sorry about that. Ryan, yes, you. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to briefly speak to Bob's point about the design of the carriers on the tank. We've had that discussion with our design consultant, Weston Sampson, already. And so we're able to do that. So we already do know that we can do that. So that was a plan that we had, and we had already looked at that option before. So it's really important for us to know if we can move forward with these temporary discussions. And so I think that gives us some direction with the carriers, and with town council now being involved with 2 of those other questions. So I think it's going to be helpful. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Karen.
I'm just surprised, since this project discussion goes back to 2017. We've never had a discussion with town council before about, you know, asking the carriers to leave the tank and get back on, even though the prior board and everybody agreed that the carriers were going back on the new water tank. I'm just a little surprised about that, so I wanted to be clear.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, we've had plenty of discussions with town council, but you've asked some questions tonight that needs to be readdressed by town council. So they were sitting right next to us on the RFP. They've been right alongside us for 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Vanessa?
Mark, you asked earlier if we should have a vote for what this board decides. I think we absolutely need to have a vote for the direction that we are moving, without question. I think the question of the timeline, so we'll have an update in December. After that, you know, with the understanding that we may not have answers from the cell providers, I would hope that we would have a feedback from town council as to our questions by then. It's over a month. And then what can both we as the board and the residents expect to be next steps after December?
Yep, and I think that I'm not usually the one who kind of comes out and says, well, we got to go the process, but that's exactly why I want to do this very methodically, is to make sure we kind of check the things, to make sure we don't have problems, we make clear how we want to move forward, and then we talk about what are the specific steps that accomplish that. And again, that's, I think, our next meeting, our next discussion about this.
That's great. I agree. When are we tentatively planning on doing that? Is that a January discussion? Is that a February discussion? I'm trying to set expectations here for what residents can expect us to take this up, and still, to Carlo's point, keep moving this forward. So are we making this a monthly discussion until we have a resolution?
Maybe that's, you thinking as an agenda item or more just as an update, kind of at each month as to where things stand?
I think it needs to be an agenda item, and I think that residents need to be notified every time this hits the agenda.
So what I would suggest then is we want to know that there is meaningful progress taking place, as opposed to just having a meeting where nothing's happened. So I would put that back and suggest Bob, Ryan, come back to us ideally in the next few days in terms of what are the pieces that need to be done. So we know the town council piece. Ryan, you answered the question about the feasibility of having the transmitters on this tank. So that's a shorter time frame. But maybe come back to us and suggest here's a time frame in which we can have some discussions with carriers and have some additional feedback. I really would like to see it in December, and I think I'll ask the board members, but would we be willing to have an additional meeting in December? I know there are already 3 or 4. If that's the right time frame to have more information here.
Yes, that's fine with me.
Yes.
Yes.
So I think we can do that also. So I think our target is in December to have kind of a meaningful update and plan to take it forward that would allow for the tank activities to take place and this temporary mitigation sorts of questions to be not fully resolved, but addressed. Carlo, I saw your hand, I'm sorry.
I think I was scratching, but I think I'm more on board with Vanessa as far as we've discussed this. We've discussed it for years. This board is relatively new to this, but I don't know what else there is to discuss other than getting feedback from Bob and Ryan and Public Works. But I think everything, the foundation is there. Everything is there. I think in December, even if there's a few pieces missing, now that we're all on the same page of water tank with the equipment, to me, there's not too many missing pieces to move forward. That's just my opinion. And that, yes, a more formal process of notification and resident involvement, but I just think we made a lot of residents happy tonight, a lot of neighbors happy tonight, barring something catastrophic, that we're moving forward what the neighborhood wants. So that's a big goal accomplished tonight, in my opinion. And now we need to get this water tank going, because I know Bob wants to get it done. I'm sure Ryan wants to get it done, and we need to get it done. So whether the December is January, that's okay. We're still in COVID. I get it, but we need to vote and not, maybe a monthly update's fine. It's already middle of October, but I'd rather not have a special meeting, not because I'm being selfish, but I think this shouldn't take a lot of time. It really shouldn't take a lot of time.
Right.
And that's
So
just my opinion.
if the biggest missing piece is kind of consulting with town council, just to make sure that we've kind of circled around this completely. And if there are any other issues, Bob and Ryan, that you come up with that would kind of prevent us moving forward, we have a meeting next week, which might be a little bit too rosy. We have a meeting in November, which we could certainly put it on the agenda also. And there's no reason to wait till December if we can get enough of what we need to move forward before then. I'm fine with it. And I think you're right, Vanessa. I think having a more formal vote is what we need to do here, just to be clear. Ryan. Oh, sorry.
Oh, am I unmuted? There we go. I think, yeah, give us a little bit of time for me to try to coordinate something with the carriers. That'd be very helpful, as well as in coordination with talking to town council. So we can make that happen relatively quickly. We may have an update sooner than later, but it's going to hinge on whether or not I can get all of them together. There's a million people that change over. They change over more than this previous board has changed over. How many people that I've talked to at the carrier. So we'll try to coordinate that and get that effort going for sure.
Or maybe we could look toward even November as a time frame.
Yeah, I will certainly not sit on this. I'll get that going sooner than later.
Thanks, Bob.
I just want to make sure I understand the board's expectations. We can give an update anytime, 5-10 minutes. But if you expect us to coordinate and invite the neighborhood on a convenient date, that's a different story. So I can work with you offline on that, Mark, but I just want to make sure that an update is not the same as, you know, a quasi public hearing, if you will.
Yeah, again, I think I would like to be able to make progress, and those are the times when it'd be great to notice everyone and let them know what's happening. But I think what we're talking about is really the kind of the first step of committing to this is the way we want it to happen. If I'm hearing my fellow board members, that's what we want to get done, is to have this process moving and clear. And yes, we won't have all the answers from all the carriers. And Ryan, you may find you don't want to meet all of them together at all. You want to meet with them individually and just say, here's what's going to happen. What do you want to do about it? So, and again, maybe town council can inform that. Karen.
Yes, I would agree. I'd like to vote that we will no longer have discussions about building a cell tower in this location, because maybe that should have been done back in 2017, 2018, but it wasn't done. We've had to have this discussion again, but hopefully for Ryan, Sprint and T-Mobile are merged. So, you know, maybe that's gonna make your life a little bit simpler, maybe.
I have to imagine this equipment they've got up there is how many technologies old is it?
It's
Mark,
not as old as
we've asked the
it's not as
question.
old as you think it is.
New equipment is bigger,
Oh, great.
Yeah.
which
It-
is not
it-
what I expect.
The newer equipment is getting heavier, it's getting bigger. You would think it would go the opposite way, because that's what Bob and I thought. That's not the case. And they've continually updated their equipment since they've been on the tank. So it's relatively new, so to speak.
In that case, we won't let them give it up. I'll have to keep that stuff. Vanessa.
I don't think we have to, for future meetings, I don't think we need official hearings until we're at the point when we're ready to vote. I do think the neighborhoods need to be notified, but we don't need to post a hearing. When we get to the point where we are having a vote, we absolutely should post a hearing for any final discussion. And since it seems like we're wrapping up a little bit, Larry has emailed us again asking us not to close the hearing before he's had an opportunity to speak.
Just to be clear, it's not a hearing. But if board members are okay, let's hear from Larry Mize, and then turn it back over to Jackie and Mark to ask them to see if they have any comments on kind of where we are. All right. So can we, if Larry's in the waiting room, can we invite him in, please? Larry, I think we have sound, but not video.
Yeah. How's that?
Excellent.
Perfect. All
Back to
right.
the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yes, I like that place. So a couple things that I picked up was the tower's in rough shape. The tower has to come down. The tower has to be replaced. The equipment has to go back on the old tower. On that tower right now, there's 3 cell phone towers and 3 public safety antennas. What are we doing for temporary for the public safety antennas? What are we going to do about those?
That's certainly part of our discussion, because you could just drop the carriers, but it'd be awfully difficult for us to drop public safety communications. So we'll have to come up with a solution. Luckily, our equipment's much smaller.
All right, so, and then also, they have another cell phone tower in Reading over by the rubber plant that they made look like the chimney. Can we have the new antennas made like the tower?
So I don't know if you were present for the presentation, but the tank that's this is why I showed the one at Peabody. That's sort of how it would look. They would blend into the paint. They can blend into the paint. We can have it so it's shrouded a little bit, so they wouldn't stick out as much.
Perfect. But yeah, my biggest concern was the public safety antennas. Thank you.
That's a valid
Thank you for
concern.
bringing
Thank
that
you.
up, Larry.
Yep, bye.
Thanks. Jackie and Mark, we're open to your feedback.
I'm turning it over to the better half here.
Really nothing other than thank you. We know this has been time consuming for the board and for staff, and we appreciate the time and focus that you've given and the opportunities to move ahead with additional information from town council and updated information from the carriers.
And we can be a resource.
And, to the extent that we can be a resource in sharing info and updates with our neighbors, we continue to be happy to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, folks. I think a resource in terms of neighbors is great, but also a resource in terms of some of your knowledge of the industry.
Yes.
Has been already helpful and would
Very
be
much
appreciated
so.
to continue.
Very helpful.
So
Yes.
thank you, guys. Other folks that want to have comment on this topic now? Yeah, Jane, you've been observing. I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to share.
No, I'm fine. Thank you for asking.
Good. Okay. So
Don't leave yet.
let's so again, it wasn't a public hearing, but let's finish this topic. We're at 10:27. What I would ask the board is simply let's talk about the next agenda, which is for next week. So we're posted for tomorrow at the Financial Forum, and it sounds like a number of people will be attending, so that's great. So we'll if there's a quorum, we'll call. Vanessa?
There's numerous people who have stayed with us for a very long time. If you'd like to leave us now, please feel free. So thank you and all for joining, and good night.
Great, thanks, folks. So for the 27th, sorry, I'm just going to jump to, so we're starting with an executive session. So what we'll do is at 7 o'clock, we'll meet, we'll call to order, we'll call to executive session with plans to return to regular session upon that completion. Then, sorry, I'm scrambling to find my agenda. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to do it on email.
Mark, do you want me to share?
Yeah, please, if you would, Bob. That'd be great.
Can you see that?
Sorry, I have too many things open. It'll take me one
There's
sec.
the executive session right there.
Great. Yep, okay, then, so there's a Bunratty's liquor license hearing that is, will be for 8 o'clock, so that's previously posted. Conscom draft policy on trees on public land. Bob, sounds like that we'll be able to move forward and have that discussion.
Yes.
Great. Article 1.4, section 1.4 in communication. Ann and Bob, is that on track?
Yes.
Great, we'll do that. We actually have two other things. So there's the town manager review, and we didn't finish the goals. And I'm tempted to ask if we could move that section 1.4 to another date in favor of putting in the working on goals and the review on the 27th, or we need to move something. But I'm going to suggest that 1.4 get moved out to later.
Mark, I thought we did finish goals because we were editing as we went. What did we not finish?
We didn't get all the way to the end, actually. So in last meeting's packet, I believe, or forgetting, it might have been this one's, were the notes that were taken during the meeting, but we didn't finish. So I'm expecting that it's not a very long, it's not an hours long discussion, but I think it's a discussion that we want to have and complete. And I think we owe that to Bob and to the department so they can move forward with it. So I'm going to suggest we put that back on, and we could leave 1.4 on, but our habit seems to be that there'll be a lot of things to do. I would take it off. I'd move 1.4 to the next meeting. All right. So we'll bring the goals will be added to that. Is there anything anybody else feels is timely that needs to get onto the 27th?
Mark?
Yep.
I guess I'm getting a little concerned about, we have not had a chance to review the methane gas leak data and understand what the next steps are going forward. And that project was approved by town meeting almost a year ago. Is there anywhere we can that?
So, so November 17th is fairly open right now. Oh, sort of. Are those hearings all likely to take place, Bob, for the 17th November?
Yeah, I would say they are, but they're generally short ones. It's just a liquor license transfer in 2 cases.
Got it.
Mark,
Vanessa?
are we expected to, will town meeting be expecting an update on the gas leaks audit? I would imagine they would, since they were the ones that voted on it.
It was requested at town meeting when it was initially approved, and we weren't able to do it because we were in the middle of the pandemic. So we owe them one.
Mark, hasn't National Grid done a lot of work too, as well?
Yes, absolutely. So it's worth kind of talking about where we are and what's the process forward. We need both. And National Grid's work is some of the stuff, especially on Main Street, but not the other stuff particularly. So what if we put that into this next week's session and move CONSCOM out to November? Does that work for folks? So in other words, we clear out the CONSCOM and the 1.4. We'd bring back finishing the goals, and we'd have a discussion on the audit status update and process forward.
Is the CONSCOM relative to Ralph's situation or something separate?
Bob, I'm assuming this is feedback related to?
This is the board requested that we bring back a policy for trees on public land.
So yes.
Okay.
And I think we indicated that November is probably when it would hit the agenda.
So I had put in a couple of, I had sent an email a week or so ago about a couple of topics, including getting an update on what the staff has been planning for the Birch Meadow update. And I can't remember what the other one was now, but I don't know. Mark, did you ever see that email? Because I don't think I see them on here. And
yes, so I did see it as it related to Birch Meadow. My thinking was that with the kind of opening of the policy, is that related or is that completely separate?
So yeah, it was the other topic I'm remembering now was, a lot of effort was put into the MVP, the Municipal Vulnerability Program, and we haven't had any visibility to that. And I know I understand that staff's been working on visiting the Birch Meadow Master Plan. And I understand that there may be a public hearing coming in. We haven't had an update. So my concern was that we better know what's going on with that project before we schedule a public hearing.
So could we ask for an update for the November meeting specific to Birch Meadow, number 1? Is that timing okay?
I don't know a lot about that, but I do know that the rec committee, I'm not sure if conservation was a partner in this, was going to schedule a public hearing. So If you want an update in November and you don't want them to have a public hearing, I just need to give them that direction.
Or do we
Have
need to
them
bring it into
delay
October?
whatever their plans might be.
Or should we bring it into October so that we're not interfering with the plans?
I don't know enough to really give you a good answer on that, Mark.
Okay, could we ask,
Certainly.
yeah, and see if a 15-minute update would be possible for next week? And if it is, great. And if not, then let's push it to November.
Okay.
As it relates to the MVP, actually, I brought this up at command this week in terms of preparedness, planning, and various things, because it seemed appropriate as we were talking about how to do vaccination and things once there are vaccines available, and how that related to the emergency management plan and to the municipal vulnerability plan. And I actually sent Bob a note to ask Chief Burns and Assistant Chief Jackson about how we might be able to get an update for the board on the planning activities there. But I literally sent that an hour before the meeting tonight.
Okay, just in time. Thank you.
So yeah, I think, yes, we need to get that to figure out what would be the best way to update the board on how it's being updated and how it's being thought about, as opposed to kind of laying out, well, here's our emergency management plan, right?
Well, I just sent, again, that was not, I know that a lot of great people were involved in this. And I believe there was a grant with MVP program, but there's been no visibility for the board. So I really don't know what's been going on.
Yeah, so I think it's a great topic to come back, and I may have the wrong spot on that, Bob, but I thought that probably was Paul Jackson and Greg Burns would be most involved.
Yeah, I forwarded it to them. I think it's probably unreasonable that we'll have info for a packet in 2 days, but I'll give you what update I can as soon as I can.
Great. Any other topics that board members really like to see addressed in the next, days to weeks? Oh, we're good. Okay, Bob, why don't we work offline? We'll kind of finish the agenda for next week, which has to get published on Thursday. And great. Thanks, folks. I thought it was a very productive meeting tonight. We heard from a lot of residents, and we got a lot of feedback, and I think we're aligned in terms of a plan to go forward, which is great. Any other topics from anybody? Carlo, do you have a motion?
It's only 10:37, are you sure?
We can take a recess for a little bit before that motion is discussed.
Let's take a break.
For the love of God, make the motion.
Take a break. Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
And second. And what's your vote?
Aye.
Carlo,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Vanessa,
Yes.
Mark, yes. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank
Good
you,
night.
guys.
We're adjourned.
Thanks.
Good night,